Huh. Why can't you see me? Can you hear me? Huh. Man, that takes a while. It's quite a bit of a delay. Huh. Why can't you see me? Can you hear me? Huh. Man, that takes a while. It's quite a bit of a delay. Huh. Why can't you see me? Can you hear me?
beautiful enough, gracious enough, if you will, to fill the slot. And so it's not ideal, right? But we're going to give it the old college try. The show must go on, as they say, etc. Is my stream not live? I'm getting some people saying my stream isn't live. Beautiful enough, gracious enough.
Let me check.
There are people in there right now. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, but President Sunday is on his way. Straighterator's on her way, and Destiny will be here shortly. And once that happens, we'll get going. We're going to cover a lot of topics tonight, gang. We're going to cover tech censorship. We're going to cover deplatforming. We're going to cover freedom of speech. We're going to cover like freedom of association. All these things, right? We're going to talk about it. And I don't know if any of you have seen the Alex Jones panel with him at Minds Fest. But I thought that had potential, but it ended up not being a very good panel. It ended up not being a very interesting discussion. And I thought I'd take a crack at it. And discuss some of the same topics, some of the same things in a much more interesting way, with perhaps a bit more interesting questions. Destiny asked a few questions there that I don't think anyone answered, and I would have liked to hear the answer to them. So we'll see. Right? I know Destiny is banned on Twitch. This is a YouTube exclusive, correct? It's not live on Twitch, no. You know what? If you guys give me enough money to offset the money I make on Twitch to go live here permanently forever and exclusively, cool, right? But until then, I got to make my money, gang, and I get about half of it from Twitch. So, you know what? That's what we're going to do. I am dual streaming a lot to YouTube. Not every stream, but okay, thank you, No Clue B, for giving Soros a call and getting that set up. Where is everyone? It's time.
See, conservatives are actually on time. You know that, right, Wick? We actually have a sense of punctuality. That's why our incomes are high.
I see Destiny's talking to Gideon on his stream, so he might be a couple minutes.
Typical, right?
Fine. You know what? If Gideon wanted on this discussion, I would let him. Just FYI. Beautiful. Excellent.
Did you let the other panelists know?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Well, I didn't talk to Destiny about it, but Destiny, I don't talk to him about my panelists, right? Like, I says, "You want to come on?" And he says, "Sure," and that's it. That's the only discussion we have. Cool. Yeah. Hello, by the way.
Hello. Sorry, there's a good line to end on. You're talking with Destiny about your penis. Why exactly?
Panelists.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Slight difference, right?
I mean, Lactoid's here now, so I don't know about that.
What about penis? I wasn't listening. Something about penis.
Okay. But yeah, thanks for coming, gang. Do we get to see you?
Yeah, give me 1 sec. I'm just figuring this out.
Straight has a camera. Hallelujah.
It exists. It's happening.
Beautiful.
So I'm gonna put that there. Go here. Main camera on. Good.
Okay, here we go.
Boom.
Leon and Anna.
Oh, I'm up there now. What the hell?
I'm sorry to drag you away from that, Destiny.
No, you're good. Hold on, let me get a drink real quick. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, take your time.
God, I cannot get this to fucking fit. Okay.
You're looking good on my end.
Oh no, I know it's on my end.
Okay.
We're still competing, remember. I need to have a better presentation. Plus, I've got the border on my side, so I'm the main character. There we
go. Once Destiny gets back, I'll open this up, give us our opening spiel, and we'll just get into it. No opening statements tonight. I do have a question to start us off. I have been bouncing around ideas, right, of what I wanted to ask initially, and I think I've landed on something that would be interesting, right? But I guess we'll see. when we go into it. As always, if you have trouble getting in, let me see your hand. I will be jumping in with questions and thoughts of my own time to time. How's everyone's audio, gang? Can everyone hear everything fine?
Sounds good to me.
You
I'm
sound.
talking to the audience specifically. I want to know if they can hear you fine.
Wow. Okay, fine.
I see how it is. It's all about Wix audience.
Okay, great. I'm sorry I cucked your content, gang. They're complaining in my chat that we cucked the content of the year. But you know what? This will be content too, and it'll be interesting in a different way. It's not the same sort of drama, but we'll get into it, I'm sure. Destiny, hello. Welcome.
Hello.
We ready to start? We all good? Everyone situated?
All good. All Gucci.
Beautiful. In that case, welcome to yet another episode of Wick TV, a cross-ideological space where people can come together from different walks of life to talk. And if Gideon wanted in on this, he's allowed to be in on this. I think he'd make an interesting thing, but I don't know if he does. Let me start by apologizing. Iona fell ill. She was initially supposed to be here and talking to us, but she messaged me about 2 hours ago that she wasn't going to be able to make it. She had a huge migraine and just could not attend. So I
Wait, who is this
apologize.
person?
Iona Italia, she's the chief editor of Aereo magazine. She's written for Quillette,
She
the Queer
dodging.
Majority.
100%. I'm not buying it.
She's been on my show before. She knew what
With
she was
me?
getting to, right? So,
I don't believe it.
fair enough. Maybe. Regardless, she could have. It could have been a great show, but it'll be a great show because we have Lactoid to replace her. So, Lactoid, I appreciate you coming in last minute and talking to us. Thank you.
No problem.
And with this, we're going to talk about tech censorship today. I watched a panel with Destiny and Alex Jones at the Minds Fest that he recently did, and I was very disappointed in how that went. And I thought that this was an interesting enough topic that we could talk about it in a more productive manner. And so I've gathered a team, gang, to discuss this, and we'll see how it goes. And I guess I'd just ask, first of all, straight up, is Twitter and other social media companies, right? Have they become the de facto town square? What do we think?
Are we going around in circles or is this just
Up to
free-for-all?
you. Anyone wants to jump in? Go ahead.
Well, my immediate after you.
My opinion, I think, is that the totality of like the 3 or 4 big social media companies has become like the town square, and they seem to be kind of lockstep in terms of moderation policies. So like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, I guess, like those 4, we're probably like this is like the new town square.
Everyone agree with that? Are we?
I don't.
Okay.
The first thing that occurs to me is that you say, has it become the new town square? And when I think about, there's 2 angles that I would take issue with that statement. The first is that, has it become the new town square from what? Were we all assembling in some wide open space with a bunch of robots in addition, just like yelling random stuff at random strangers and then swiftly disappearing back into the crowd to come again in a later time to do the same thing over and over again? That's not typically what we have in mind when we think of the town square. What we
Could
think
I
of when
enter
we say,
something there just as a quick thing?
please.
I think didn't that actually used to be the case that there were like people like screaming on corners and shouting and like holding pamphlets and
No,
doing
like town hall meetings were very disorderly. The issue that I'm bringing up is not the chaoticness of the actual thing itself. The point is that there's an interminability and a kind of unenclosedness to Twitter and to social media that a town square lacks. Like, among other things, which town, right? Like, we're not talking about a community somewhere deliberating about like public action. We're talking about randos from across different borders. Sometimes, once again, like not even actual people, just throwing things. And at no point does this culminate in deliberation or an actual increase in public knowledge. Maybe sometimes it does, but it's not fulfilling the function in a liberal society that I think the town square analogy is supposed to is trying to put its finger on.
It's more of like a national town square, right? So, and I think this is especially true when public congregations or get banned, perhaps like let's say during a pandemic, where the only option you really have is to congregate online. And just like in the regular town square, you have people who say stupid things, raise their hand, yell, and you have people who are standing off on the side, maybe having more intricate conversations. I don't just because one happens to be like a more physical place as opposed to like an electronic place. I don't think that really detracts from the spirit of when we call it a town square, right? It is supposed to be a place for discussion, right? A place for ideas to be exchanged.
I don't want to monopolize. May I respond to that quickly? Okay. I don't disagree with you entirely. I think it definitely takes on some of the functions and even monopolizes some of the functions of what we associate with the town square image. But once again, like that doesn't seem to me to indicate that it fulfills the function of a town square. Perhaps it was the case that we lacked entirely for a brief period of time, maybe a long period of time, the function of a town square from like public discourse. And then as a result of social media, certain aspects of that were brought back in a potentially toxic and dangerous way.
What is maybe we should ask ourselves then what is the function of a town square? And then we can figure out if it satisfies that or not. So we're all working on the same definition.
Well, I think for myself, the function of a town square is a forum where members of a discrete community can come together and address their respective issues, decisions that affect the whole of the community, and they can weigh in, and then decision can be reached about how these things are going to be addressed. And then
Is it
people
that
disperse
deep?
and go back.
Is
What's
it
that?
that deep? Like as I understood it, historically, a town square is just where people gathered and talked about shit, right? It usually wasn't a
Yep.
formal issue, right? Like they would get up in their soapbox and maybe discuss issues of the day. But this concept goes back a long ways, right? And you're right about the discrete community. It was localized by dint of it had to be, right? They didn't have
Yep.
any other ways of long distance communication, but like. It was never really so formal, and different areas had different mores and different norms surrounding it. But yeah, as I
Well,
understood it, at least the town square was simply a
yeah.
place where people gathered to talk about what they thought, right, and discuss issues
Well,
of the day.
Well, a town square was a marketplace, so I'm collapsing two things together. So the value of a town square, why we care about that particular thing, is not because there's some intrinsic value of one random person getting up in a box and screaming to a crowd. That person could be ignored and nothing could happen as a result. That happens in a lot of different places. However, if you have a robust community where people are engaging with each other on their day to day as they're passing through their places of work and places of purchase and places of leisure and so on and so forth, you end up with a situation, at least in the ideal scenario, where the things that people are belting out to the crowd are also addressed by members of the crowd in a way where there's some commensurateness between the person speaking and the crowd that's responding to them. On Twitter, by contrast, and I was talking about this with Aaron earlier, a rando who goes onto Twitter starts off with 0 followers, has no capacity to be heard at all. Someone shouting back at the person in the town square, by contrast, does. What happens when we consider social media like Twitter and YouTube to be the town square, much more so with Twitter, is that we substitute celebrity culture with politics. And I think that's where it becomes dangerous, because now real political influence can be gained by propping up people as celebrities. Donald Trump or some other major figure has the poor judgment to respond to somebody. That person now becomes a major player. That's actually a really dangerous set of dynamics, I think. And it's not discreet to any particular community, so it doesn't seem like it actually culminates in any kind of decision. If anything, it arrests.
Right, and
Yeah.
what is the equivalent of like a counter protest at like a online in a town square? Unless if you're going to say that like the example that Sunday and I talked about was Richard Spencer. If I'm trying to counter protest what Richard Spencer is using his social media platform to do on Twitter, is that like a like a ratio? Is that supposed to be the equivalent of like countering them?
Quote tweets, and like retweets, and giving your argument.
Yeah, posting furry porn underneath. Like I've seen people do a lot of weird things when it comes online. For one interesting form of a digital protest, actually, it's not exactly the same thing. But when that was it Texas opened up their lines to like report people for being trans or something, or was it Florida or Minnesota or something? That happened, and then a bunch of people like did a bunch of fake phone calls and got the phone call line shut down. Right? There's ways to like protest people online, I think. And even on Twitter, whether it's ratios or posting images or retweeting or quote tweeting people, whatever, right?
And
Oh, it's
hashtags,
abortion
right?
for Texas. Sorry.
I mean, hashtag seems to be like that's the whole thing. That there's a reason why like they trend.
There are ways to reply. Oh, sorry. Go on.
So, continue. But I asked that question to ask others, and I'm curious. But
Okay.
continue with your thought.
Yeah, there are certainly ways in which individuals, even with no following whatsoever, can technically respond. However, now we run into the question of whether or not it satisfies the conditions of an open forum, where somebody can respond but categorically can't be heard because the system itself, for reasons that are inscrutable to most people, for legitimate reasons, um, they just have no uptake or no visibility. There are some people who will respond to very big figures and they'll make a very poignant point, and it will just go unseen. Whereas at the very least, in a literal town square, when you shout back, somebody around you hears. Maybe the person you're even shouting at hears. That is
Do you not
not the
think they
case
had
in
like
Twitter, where people
celebrity
can.
status back then too, though? Like if the town mayor or Socrates, right, walked in, obviously people were going to defer to them much more so than strangers,
Oh,
right?
of course.
Like
No, the
this-
issue I'm pinpointing isn't that celebrities and important officials and whatnot will always have an advantage in any public space. Obviously, they do. They are better known, whatever. The difference, though, is that in an actual town square, just because of physical proximity, and I'm not saying we need to bring back the town square itself. That's infeasible. The point is whether or not this counts as one. In an actual town square, um, the square itself is
okay,
not so designed that a smaller person saying something is actually muted, like they actually physically cannot be heard.
fair enough. I asked that though because I also wanted to ask something that Destiny asked the Alex Jones and the other panelists there that I don't think he got a good answer for, and I'm curious, given his stance on this as kind of like the de facto public square, what his answer would be to the question, and that's should it be a company or corporation's responsibility to uh, guard free speech or to make sure that their customers or the people that are participating on the site have access to information outside of their bubble. And what does that even look like? What do we think, gang? If you think, right, that the social media has become the town square, right? Um, do the people that own the town square and operate the town square have any responsibility to make sure that people are heard?
You're
Their
asking
only
if the
responsibility is going to be to make money and maximize profits. Insofar as they're going to be concerned about that, it will only be to cover their ass when it comes to liability. It's not really going to be in the interest of promoting one idea over the other.
I think with respect to it, I think the question itself is a bit fraught. You're asking if like a private company owns the space of public discourse, and I don't think that's really an apt comparison. For one thing,
Well, yes, you disagree that it's a public town square, right? But for those like Lactoid or Destiny even who say,
well,
well,
I mean,
they do,
well,
right?
let's pretend that it is for a second, though, right? In that case, now the responsibility becomes whatever the public determines it to be. Now we've directly linked the responsibilities of the companies because they are presiding over a specifically public service that is being anointed as like a central part of democratic deliberation. Um, if a democratic society determines that it should be legally responsible, there really is no ethical component to this. That is the ethical link. It is directly connected to law. Um, Here we run into the additional problem, though, and why characterizing it as a public space is an issue in the first place. Um, whose public space? We have people from Russia, we have people from Canada, we have people from the United States. Even in this panel, we have multiple nationalities present. Um, it's managed according to whose lights, like
Right.
who gets.
Lactoid
Yeah.
said this is like a national conversation, but really, like, Twitter is host to international users, and it's going to expand. Like, right now, our conceptions of like what constitutes free speech is going to be biased in favor of like the First Amendment and stuff like that. But Sunday is a Canadian. Lactoid obviously are an American.
My apologies.
But like the European conception of free speech is going to be incredibly anemic compared to the American, but I'm just biased to say that. I don't know that Twitter like adopting any sort of like
Well, I that just begs the question, like,
Wait,
which
hold on. Is Wick moderating this panel? Or are you debating on this panel?
I'm trying
Wick
to,
is,
I'm
Well,
doing both.
I got a few points, right? So to answer the question directly,
Fucking
yes,
Wick.
yeah, absolutely. Companies have like a responsibility to freedom of speech. it's always so odd to me that like otherwise very lefty people will just like for some reason like when you ask them about censorship, right? This is why I think authoritarianism is actually often like their underlying motive for most things. When
True.
you like when it comes to like terms of censorship, like they immediately flip into like the most free market like ANCAP you can possibly imagine. Well, no, they just they're just there to make profit. We can't even criticize them, right? We shouldn't even be able to like come together and say, well, no, like fuck you, like you were managing freedom of speech in this country and you're basically reducing it and eating away at it and eating away at the spirit of what it was intended to do. As to how that affects other countries, I mean, ultimately, I wish American free speech interpretation was the law in all countries. Ideally, America would be the country, but that's a whole different conversation.
I feel like the other countries thing is kind of a red herring. Like, who cares how other countries manage it? We should probably manage it according to U.S. standards, right? And then you would do whatever compliance you need to exist as a service in those countries. But like, we have our standards here. Like, if one country said it was okay to have child porn, we wouldn't be like, oh, well, we need to make sure that Twitter like works for them in the United States. We would moderate in the United States based on whatever we think our U.S. values ought to be.
There are
Sure, but
companies.
its function as a public space, though, is not dependent on the place in which its head offices are situated or where the
Well, it
company
kind
is
of is,
located.
yeah. I would expect like a company that's situated in Britain to operate under British values.
No,
That'd
no,
be
I'm
my
not. I'm
guess.
not. I'm not disagreeing with that. But what I'm saying though is that the argument that it fulfills the role of a public square, that is satisfied regardless of whether or not the company itself is situated legally in the United States or elsewhere. For example, it fulfills the same function in Canada as it does in the United States. It fulfills the same function in the UK as
Oh,
it
sure,
does in
it
the United
can, but
States. Yeah.
it's a fundamentally different question for them as Canadians because they're using a U.S. based company for their town square, which is kind of weird. That would be a weirder question, but that'd be for them to answer, I guess. Or they could pass laws if they feel like they want to see reform or change, like from a legal process. But
Well, yes, but I don't think Lactoid's argument would change if, for example, Twitter was located in Canada or the UK.
Lactoid, would it change?
I mean, from
He's
like a
here. We can ask him.
from like a legal perspective, yeah, I guess it would change because it would be domiciled in a different country and it would have different rules apply to it. But like,
Well, exactly. You're not talking about the legal
I'm not talking
perspective,
about
though.
that. Right? I'm talking about on like the
well, I
moral,
think even
on the
from an
moral
ethical,
responsibility. Well, no, yeah,
even
exactly.
even from a moral responsibility, it would change. If Facebook passed a law saying that women needed to cover, or not a law, I'm sorry. If Facebook passed a rule saying that in every picture of a female, the female needed to wear the hijab, right? And males needed to accompany them in public in all public pictures. Obviously, I would protest the fuck out of this. This is crazy, okay? But if somebody made like a Muhammad book or something, and it was like from fucking Saudi Arabia, and it was popular online, and that was their rule, it's like, okay, well, I mean, it's Saudi Arabians like social media. If they want to have this fucking rule on their shit, I mean, it makes sense. It's like I'm not about to tell them you need to go change your platform to comport with my American values. That wouldn't make any sense. So I think that the company headquarters and like where the company comes from is actually kind of important, I think, to the ethical question of how they ought
It
to
does.
function.
I just don't think it touches on the public square question. I'm not
Yeah.
disagreeing with anything that you're saying.
I think
Oh,
like,
I think it
there's
kind
an
of does too,
ethical
because like if the
responsibility.
public square is owned by a foreign company,
Well, it's not a public square then. It's owned by a company, which is
well, but
my
that's
point. This is
we're
why
begging the
the public
question.
square
That's
analogy
exactly what the
works.
point is.
It's a
Is the
public
square
square
now?
owned by a totalitarian country. Is that really like a public free square? I wouldn't think so. Like Saudi
Well,
Arabia.
maybe, but isn't that kind of what we're at right now? Because Facebook and YouTube and all these things are in a way totalitarian. They don't answer to constituents; they answer to shareholders, right?
Well, this is part of the problem. Right?
Should they? Well, on that, let me ask: should they? Should the government protect right people's right to, if quote unquote right, to be on social media and to have a voice on social media, such as
Are you asking if we have a
Twitter?
constitutional right to a Twitter account?
I'm asking if they should. If you should have the, since you do, in America at least, have the right to freedom of speech, and the government does protect you, right, to be able to have your right of freedom of speech in a public space, right? If you were in a public space passing out pamphlets for your stupid ass belief system, no one can come and stop you from doing that, right? Not the government, not other people, etc. The government will protect you. Should they not do so in social media as well?
I think if major politicians like Joe Biden and Donald Trump are tweeting out a good portion of their messages, maybe. Um, I loathe being on the side of Lactoid in this, but unfortunately, if we're in a situation which, like, these spaces are monopolizing over a specific type of political discourse that's very effective, whether or not I think that that's a good thing, I think you would need very strong reasons for excluding people from that.
Yeah, I
Jack
think
Dorsey thought he had a good reason when he banned Trump, right? Like it is like
No, he
on
didn't.
on what do you mean?
To ban Trump? Are you talking about?
Oh no, I'm saying Jack Dorsey single-handedly thought that he had a compelling reason to ban, a world leader at the time from his platform. And I guess he would defend that on the basis of I have the right to do that. It's my private company. This is not the
Yeah.
town square, even though it's utilized by public officials. But should he be doing that? No, he should not. Or like he shouldn't have the ability to, as like an individual actor, decide that he is not going to host a world leader. I wouldn't be comfortable if Jack Dorsey had banned Obama.
That case is tricky because at the time Donald Trump was fomenting what very well could have been an insurrectionary action, right? So it's
Yeah, like I think we can agree that even public officials, like if Biden gets on and just starts spamming the N-word, it's probably okay for him to get banned from Twitter, right, for a blatant TOS violation.
But if we're trying to say that Twitter is supposed to function as like the town square, then why would a sovereign or president ever be subject to
think-
that?
I don't think you
I-
should
I-
be actually.
well, I think you
I'd want
should
to
be, but I
know
think
if
in this
Biden was doing that.
well, I think in this particular case though, Trump was engaging in something that I think would not even be acceptable within the context of normal politics, anyways. He was calling into question an election, trying to overrun the will of the people as had been determined legally. Like, I
Do you
don't know.
think?
I don't.
Well, let me ask you directly, Sunday. Do you think that election denial or an election questions about the free and fair election in a country should be censored by a TOS company? Not whether they can or can't. I'm not asking legally whether they can or can't, but I'm asking should a company, should a corporation censor people questioning the legitimacy of an election?
Well, that's an impossible question to answer. Once again, like where and at whose behest? These are private companies. The questioning the legitimacy of an election, that's tantamount to like a prelude to a declaration of civil war. You're saying that the Constitution has been overrun and the people have been betrayed by its leadership. There's only if you actually accept that thesis, there's only two possible outcomes. You concede to what you believe is tyrannical rule, or you fight against it. So the question is whether or not the people in a position of decision-making authority have what I would deem to be just reason to think that these claims are spurious. At the end of the day, there's going to be a human being making these decisions.
Well, the
it's
rest
gonna
of
be
you
a
think-
case-by-case
So we're
basis.
saying on the grounds of like the undermining of the election could potentially lead to violence, and that's why it needs to. There's a case for it to be deplatformed, even though it's coming from a public official. Because if we're worried about like violence, right? Significantly more Americans will have died from COVID-19 vaccine disinfo, right?
Yeah.
Than will from the insurrection or something like that. As far as I know, like less than 3 people died at the insurrection or something like that. If it were a murder or something like that, this would be cut and dry. But if I'm like a Weinstein brother disseminating nothing but vaccine misinfo, and I'm responsible for the deaths potentially of misleading thousands of people, he's not going to be in a jail cell. He's going to be in a mansion by the end of the night.
I
Here-
think
here's
that
the-
there's I think there's a difference. I think some deaths we're willing to accept. We should be willing to accept a democracy. Other deaths we're not willing to accept. If, as part of our engagement of freedom of speech, some people end up spreading information that causes harm to other people, like we could call it stochastic terrorism if we want, that's a form of freedom of speech. That's a negative repercussion of freedom of speech that we accept as part of having the right to freedom of speech. So the COVID misinformation or anything else, we accept that. That's a cost of freedom of speech. However, a direct call to violence, we don't consider that freedom of speech. That's not a cost we're willing to bear. For somebody saying we should go out and kill all black people, like any deaths associated with that are too much because that type of speech has no value. We don't value that whatsoever. But we do value the ability to speak freely about things that other people might consider harmful, even if those things at the end of the day do manifest in some real harm.
It's a directive speech, not like an informative or inquisitive speech, right? That's the difference, and that's what.
This is-
that's why they-
Well, no, not just directive, to be clear, because somebody could direct you not to get vaccinated, right? Technically.
They can
Or
also direct you not to get vaccinated using implicature, not a direct statement that somebody can clearly point to and say, hey, this unequivocally means this sentence in all cases.
Yeah.
Like it's always going to be subject to interpretation, or in many cases will be subject to interpretation.
I think potentially that's different. I think if you tell like somebody on the internet you should not get vaccinated or you should get vaccinated, like I think that speech is much more on the table to get regulated than like talking about what you think the efficacy of COVID vaccines are, right? One is like a direct call to something. You're not like having a discussion about the merits of it or like the underlying truth value, which is like ultimately the point of this. The first part, though, is like the discussion of truth. And
You don't think you should be able to like tell somebody like, hey, I think you should get vaccinated, or hey, I don't think you should get vaccinated?
I don't think that, obviously some calls to action like aren't bad enough to where, or like aren't like imminent violence under different tests that I would consider them to be like those specific phrases to be banned. But I think that like the only like category of speech that I'm like willing to go after is going to be like not like truth seeking kind of like inquisitive speech, but more like go do this, or let's all get together and do this, right? One is directly, I think one's completely different than the other.
So what if some very moneyed and well organized actors flood the online space with misleadingly phrased questions that tend towards a specific interpretation?
Like Purdue.
Asking questions about like the efficacy of vaccines. Has this actually been adequately researched? Da, 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 da. And the direct implication, the read that most reasonable people who are otherwise uninformed will take from this is, I should probably hold off a little bit. And now you actually have a real public danger that's not just confined to one nationality. Now you have a real public danger where a bunch of people are suddenly holding off on the vaccine. The disease, meanwhile, is spreading. And like you see how immediately bring this up to climate change as well. Same deal. You end up with an interminable kind of arrest of action and address of serious issues with a very short time scale. Like that's a problem.
Yeah, Lactoid, is the threshold for you is that it has to be explicit and that anything short of that could not reasonably be interpreted as a true call to action?
Yeah. So my opinion on this like follows essentially like what the Supreme Court said in Brandenburg, right? The idea is it's got to be like imminent, like a call to like imminent violence that has to be somewhat credible, right? There needs to be something behind it, and it needs to be like imminent. Let's go do this, like directive action, because this like implication of, well, we can draw a line from something like the truth-seeking question that you're asking today to then like it's implied, or like a reasonable person could intuit that this actually has like a directive kind of statement hidden within, or someone could come to a directive statement. Like before you know it, all speech is on the table, right? Like,
But who judges?
Now we can censor people trying to call out Purdue Pharma. You know, the people who are like, "Hey, this shit's actually addicting." Well, hold on. Are you telling? If you point out that's addicting, then some people might not get it, and so you're basically telling people to not buy OxyContin, and so like they're dying or they're in tremendous amounts of pain. We're gonna censor you now. Like you can basically do anything.
But who judges what is imminent? How is that judged? That is going to be a person drawing a line. At some level of analysis, that is an inevitable factor in every single censorship decision.
Yeah, and I think this is like on the responsibility of companies to have like a much more transparent and clear TOS. Not like we're just going to ban hateful conduct. It's like we are going to like in this kind of situation, like example A, B, or C, or you know, if there's something that like according to I don't know U.S. Supreme Court precedent or whatever about what is the definition of imminent violent action or a call to credible threat of violence, things like this. That makes sense to me.
Do we think there's been a lot of talk on this topic of toss, right? And moderation decisions by tech companies. There's been a lot of talk that tech companies have been putting their thumb on the scales to promote certain ideologies and to demote or shadow ban or get rid of other ideologies. One, do we think this is happening? And to what degree? And what's the solution to this if you do think this is happening? Or if it's not happening, what is happening instead? What are you thinking?
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of stuff that's related to the conservative agenda that's not very popular on social media platforms. Like most people that are going to be asking questions about like climate change or vaccines are probably going to be right-leaning. And if that type of stuff is being heavily moderated, then conservatives are probably going to feel like they're getting moderated out more than anything else.
And the stats reflect that, right? So like I think it was, of all people banned on Twitter, it was like I think 4 or 5 times more conservative-leaning people get banned than left-leaning people.
That may be true, but I think it's well, let's assume that is true. It's also been determined nonetheless that conservative coded tweets are massively more amplified than left-wing coded ones. So it may be the case that conservatives just on average, or conservative coded, because how are we determining these? It's going to be based on superficial characteristics. Conservative coded actors are just breaking TOS more often. Maybe they just have less self-control when it comes to using slurs.
Right, it obfuscates the point to just say that conservatives are being disproportionately targeted or banned as a result of these enforcements, because like when you actually look into it, sometimes it's just flagrant inability to follow even just the most um, basic anti-harassment policies and stuff like that. And there's a difference between being banned because you're a conservative, or were you banned and you also happen to be a conservative, you know?
Sure, I didn't go through every single ban. I just know that like 4 to 5 times more conservatives are banned. I look at like shadow banning, right, which Twitter said it wasn't doing. It turns out it was, which I think is fraud. But shadow banning, I mean, at least my perception is this happens more often to conservatives. I don't know, like, what are you talking about when you say conservative voices are like amplified more on social media? Do you think that's true?
Well, what are you talking about when you say conservatives are banned more?
I have a study.
Okay. Fair
So
enough.
I think, to be clear, I think we have to be careful when we say conservatives are banned more. Like, let's say somebody calls somebody the N-word on Twitter. That's probably a bannable offense. If we think that happens, who's more likely to be doing that? Probably going to be a conservative account, right?
Well,
So,
are they talking to Candace Owens, or are they talking
one.
to a normal person?
Yeah,
Right?
That's because
So
the
I think-
slurs against us aren't banned yet. It's unfair.
sure.
That's
but
not
I'm just-
true. Wasn't Hassan removed off of Twitch for saying, I can't even say it, can I?
Well,
The
Twitter.
C word.
We're on YouTube. We can say cracker all we want over here.
Yeah, but was Wick on Twitch? Oh, you're not on Twitch.
No, I'm Destiny's. No, that would
We
be
can't be on
terrible.
Twitch right now.
I'm the Twitch ward.
Oh, that's a good
That's-
question. Sunday, do you
What?
think that they should lift Destiny's Twitch ban?
What was the ban for initially? It was you were saying something to the effect of rednecks need to mow down BLM rioters or something like that.
No, I don't know what my ban was for, but it definitely wasn't that because that was a long time ago.
Okay, well, if it
It was a
wasn't for
truth
that, then
statement, and he got banned for it. This is the evidence of the problem.
well, what was
What's
the truth statement?
That American hero, Kyle Rittenhero.
No,
was
hold
like-
on. That wasn't even what I got banned for. Where do you guys get this
what was
idea
it
from?
censored? Let's be honest. Okay?
No, that happened like a year. That was like 2 years ago.
That was the
I-
first one. That was the first big one.
I got
I
unpartnered
don't
for
think
that.
that-
I didn't get banned for that.
Well, so do you have any idea what you got banned for? Because now I thought I knew, but
If
apparently I don't.
my guess is
Guess,
that
your guess.
I think when I was fighting with people, I called somebody subhuman, and apparently they decided that was ban worthy now. I think that's what I've heard from Twitch, but I don't have an official reason. I don't know officially.
Okay, the redneck mowing people down thing. If he was banned for that, arguably. The other thing, no, that's dumb.
Okay, fair enough. What about
Or strike that reverse. Yeah,
Sure,
if
sure.
it
Lack
was-
of
it was for an insult.
transparency. Right, that's the problem here. If
So-
you banned, you don't even know why. That's crazy.
Well,
We
that's a Twitch specific issue, right? I mean, like that sucks. I don't like that their TOS is impenetrable. That they don't give adequate explanations for why they ban people. That's annoying, and that sows distrust towards them.
And which
But
political
that doesn't really. Well, that doesn't really bear on the. Well, that doesn't really bear on their responsibility as a platform unless we're already construing them as a town square. Now we've already identified 2 different companies.
I think I'm still on like the town square thing. Like another reason why that falls flat is that I don't think Twitter, as far as I know, is in the interested in litigating slander or libel. So, and like a town square, that would be actionable. Like I wouldn't be able to just go up and start talking about how Steven sexually abused me, allegedly, without there being repercussions to that, as opposed to
Well, I think.
on.
Well, no, you can. Yeah, you'd attack the speaker. In that case, because of Section 230, the social medias do actually function kind of like a town square. Like somebody go on Twitter and say some shit like that, and Twitter doesn't get banned for that. It's the person that would like suffer criminal charges, or I'm sorry, civil charges. But it'd be the same in a town square. If somebody goes and defames somebody in a town square, then you're not going to sue the street. You would sue the person making the speech.
Yeah, but there's recourse there. Like I don't see like
Wait,
Twitter.
what do you mean? What's the difference for recourse? What do you mean by that?
Because in a town square, if you do it, you can take them to civil, potentially criminal court. As opposed to if you try to report another user on Twitter, they said this thing about me. Can't they just always back up and say this is a matter of opinion? Even if there are slanderous or libelous statements within what they're saying. And
Yeah,
like,
they could say it's a matter of opinion, but it's going to be the exact same whether it's on Twitter in a town square. Where the defamation happens doesn't make a difference.
Or they could deny it was them and say they were hacked or something.
I
Or they
don't know
could
if that
deny it was
defense
them
has
and say
worked
it
for
was them.
anybody yet, and I imagine in
either.
discovery you could probably fight that.
Yeah, I'm not sure the specifics of how a legal case would go about in the differences between a legal case brought online versus brought in person. I'd imagine they'd still have the same standards of evidence needed to convict. And defamation is at least in America historically pretty high, right? Like the standards you need to meet are actually very hard to meet. And
Well,
it becomes
that's not necessarily
especially
true.
with public figures.
Yeah, for public figures, the standards are very high, but for a private citizen, not necessarily that high. I don't think.
What's the threshold for being a public versus a private citizen, though?
yeah, I'm not sure the difference here.
Something you fight about in front of a jury, or you'd have to convince a judge, probably. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, the lines here.
He's
are not,
researched
definitive.
this one.
The lines here are not definitive, but even among like non-public figures, defamation cases are comparably difficult to win compared to other forms of injury, because it's like one of the civil cases that you have to prove some kind of like malintent. Because
Well, that's only for public figures. That's what makes it hard for public figures. I don't believe you have to prove malintent for just a normal citizen.
I think you have to prove some level of malintent, because if the person's like under a reasonable expectation that this is the truth about this other person, and they say it, but it turns out that they're wrong, and they're like, oh, sorry, I guess I was wrong. Like, I had reasonable belief to believe it, though. I mean, if that's the standard for defamation.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
but I
that,
think the
well,
difference
for
is because
malice,
for a reasonable, like, why are you making these claims publicly about a person if they're not like a public figure and if it's not like a newsworthy thing?
So here's something interesting that comes about as a direct result of this flattening of social media that we were talking about earlier. If someone like Donald Trump highlights a small account, slanders them, and by so doing increases their profile by orders of magnitude, and then somebody else piles in on that person, is that person therefore being criticized as a public figure?
I think that'd be a really hard sell. The difficult part is,
Probably.
yeah, like when it comes to a lot of this is case law, a lot of this is jurisdiction dependent, and a lot of this is going to be defining the exact lines is just, it's just going to be, there's no real clear answer here as to like what's a public figure, who's acting in the course of a public figure, like what level of like malintent you have to show.
I think as far as the law is concerned, isn't just malice is not going to have anything to do with like disliking somebody or ill will. I think it's the only two things that you have to demonstrate is that the person knew that it was false, or they were acting with like a reckless disregard for whether or not the statement was even true.
Let me ask you this.
Wait, hold on, wait. Is Lactoid, are you like a lawyer or a law student guy?
I'm a civil litigation attorney. I've been practicing for like 2 or 3 years.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, then you'll know anything more than me. Okay. My understanding was what you're talking about for malintent. I thought that was it falls under the actual malice standard set by the New York Times v. Sullivan case, but that only applies to public figures. So like publishing incorrect information about a private citizen, I thought that could get you in trouble for defamation. You don't have to prove that they were acting with malice if it's not a public person, because for private citizens, the standards for defamation are way, way, way lower. That was my understanding. To avoid the chilling effect of publishing wrong information about like public figures. Essentially.
Well, let me ask you this.
Well, wait, let him explain. If he's a law
Yeah,
student,
explain.
Yeah, so I guess I probably misspoke. So let me explain a little bit. So when I'm talking about malintent, are you guys familiar with the like concept of like negligence? This idea of like you have this like obligation to somebody, and like you violate that obligation, right?
Yeah.
And so like you have an obligation to somebody to like if you say something about somebody that is like wrong, that you know is wrong, and that is like going to cause damages, and you do so negligently, right? I mean, technically, that's going to be the standard for a private citizen. Now, this is again more of like a just experience thing of. It just seems like in order to win those, like you have to show some kind of there's some kind of like hidden agenda, right? There was some kind of malintent, because otherwise, how do you show negligence, right? How do you show that they were acting? Because if they were given information that was
no, you need malintent for negligence. That doesn't sound right.
Wait, for negligence, you would just have to demonstrate that the person was not employing a reasonable level of scrutiny or care when they were publishing or making the statement. And I think it's that standard is way lower than like actual malice, right?
Yeah, like if I negligently publish something about you, Lactoid, like somebody's like, oh, Lactoid's a rapist, and I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna publish that, right? You might be able to sue me for defamation because I'm being kind of negligent. But if somebody gives me that information about a public figure, right, will say Wick, massively popular panel host, and I publish it, that I have to actually meet a higher standard there to be sued for defamation. You'd have to show not only did you know it was wrong, you were like grossly negligent or malicious in your publishing the information.
Yeah, like did that person do everything that would be reasonably necessary to attempt to determine whether or not the statements that they were making were true? And like they could provide evidence that they were by showing research, editing, fact checking their work,
Right.
Trustworthiness of sources, stuff like that.
Right. That's what. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Like you have to show like some level of, hey, like I
So,
wasn't
out
negligent
of
because of XYZ reason, even if the evidence is false.
out of curiosity, just for my own edification, do streamers count as public figures? So, for example,
They could.
if they could, okay. So, does there have to be a threshold? Like, for example, do you have to be Destiny sized, or could
I'm
you be
pretty sure
smaller?
all of that, none of this is going to be hard. I think this is all going to be argued in front of a judge. You've got to try to
Interesting. Fair
convince
enough.
them, like, this person for these purposes ought to be considered a public figure, essentially.
It
Okay.
seems like it would always be relative too. So like someone like Destiny versus someone like, I don't know, like Asmongold, for example. I don't know off the top of my head what the relative sizes are, but I think it's roughly 50% larger. Like, would Destiny be considered a public figure in the light of a suit against that
I guess
figure,
what I'm
right?
asking specifically is if someone were to read like the Destiny report that Mr. Girl released, or see some of Lav's accusations, and then spread that, believing what they read, believing what they heard, right, and saying, "Oh wow, Destiny did this," and started talking and just spreading it to all corners, would they be liable under the law to be considered defaming, or because Destiny's kind of a public figure, they wouldn't really be able to be targeted that way? I'm just curious.
My guess would be because that report deals with me utilizing a large platform. In that case, I would almost de facto be like a public figure because it's writing a report around a public person using a platform that like reaches a lot of people. That'd be my guess. That'd be pretty easy to argue.
Should, right, social media companies be enforcing standards to defamation? So if someone is engaged in what could reasonably be assumed to be defamation, should corporate media companies build that into their TOS? Should honesty be built into TOS? So if someone is purposely spreading misinformation, should TOS put a stop to that, or should it be allowed? What are we thinking?
Well, I don't think Lactoid can answer that question because fundamentally, once again, this is up to human interpretation. Someone's going to be making an inference that this claim is untrue, or that this claim is defamatory, that this claim is being made in a misleading fashion. So even like the asking of certain kinds of questions, for example, can imply like a certain statement, and that can have like serious social effects, individually or broadly. And so it's going to be up to some person's, hopefully, some person's judgment whether or not that passes muster. I think in the case where it's been determined by law, I think it's trivial at that point. Like obviously they shouldn't allow that kind of thing to be spread if it's been determined legally to be defamation, but otherwise.
You ask the question one more time, Wick?
Sure. Should honesty be built into TOS? Should if you are found to be lying about someone or something, be subject to moderation by a social media company?
If you're found to be like willingly lying, like
Willfully
you
lying,
knew
like
it was
for
false.
example, right? You knew it was false, but you said that Lactoid is stinky. He has super stinky feet, and you just continually told that lie to one and all, right? Should a corporate media, a social media company say we're gonna pull your account, we're gonna stop you, we're gonna block you?
If you can demonstrate that this person was like knew that they were lying, then
Sure, you have text shown that
yeah. I'm
you wanna lie
I'm
about a
way
stinky
more
feet.
sympathetic. I'm way more sympathetic to like that, to like regulation of that stuff and removal of that stuff than I am about somebody genuinely believing that this is like a truth statement and then making that statement and the powers that be don't agree that it's actually the true statement.
Wait, well, I don't think social media companies should have anything to do with defamatory claims. That's not. If you want to settle defamatory stuff, then you go, because otherwise, like, what is the burden of research put on social media companies to figure out like if a statement is true or false? Like, hey, John said that like I shit myself in school. Like, I want to ban him because I think that statement is like. Do we really want social media companies in the business of trying to determine how true people gossiping about each other
Yeah,
is?
that's fair. I don't know how much like
Yeah.
I don't think I would put a lot of like I guess under Section 230, I wouldn't put like a ton of like responsibility on social media companies to like affirmatively do this. But like I can imagine a scenario of which like, oh hey, it was determined by a court that this was false, or hey, like even though we didn't do we did like a minor investigation and we found out like it was a lie, like this person knew that.
How about this? How about this? Here's
Then
a
I
good
guess
question.
I'd be okay with it.
Here's a good question. What if an account in Pakistan accuses somebody of urinating on the Quran? See, that can culminate in an actual immediate violence against that person if they're identifiable, right?
I just don't think social. It's just not something I would care for. That'd be like saying like, do we think should social media
Right.
companies ban you if you've got like 3 felonies? Like I don't know. I don't think like if you murder someone, should you get banned from Facebook?
No, sure, but like in the event that defamation or something sort of in the broad category of defamation results in immediate extra legal harm to an individual, or can be predicted to result in immediate extra legal harm to an individual. This can go from like the example I just gave to like accusations of somebody engaging in child grooming, for instance. Is there not an argument then for a social media platform that becomes aware of this as a pattern? Like again, we can set like a certain threshold of awareness here, where they're aware this is a pattern, they're aware that this can have like serious consequences. However, of course, given who they are and how they're operating and where they're situated, they don't have a way to actually determine the truthfulness of the statement. Or, in the case of the person who pissed on the Quran, if whether or not the statement is true. Arguably, like it seems to me that it's fairly trivial. Like the value of curtailing that is greater than.
So to be clear, you would be okay with banning false accusations like that, right?
I think it's a gray area where I would allow some level of flexibility.
What if I did? What if I did piss in the Quran and this is like the one guy that saw it, and then he accuses me and I just deny it?
Well,
like,
what I'm getting at with this is that it really depends on where you're situated. So where you are, that will result in nothing happening to you. Maybe a couple of Muslims will get mad at you online. If you're, for example, a woman in Pakistan who is accused of this, that might result in your death. So it's different stakes.
Again, though, should the social media company, right, be responsible for moderating that? And I don't know if they should, right?
Well, it's like there's a different question of responsibility versus do they retain the right to do so?
Fair,
Yeah.
right? Like, but rather than asking can they, I'm asking should they.
Well, I only asked the question of can they because I think it's only going to it's going to come down to a matter of size, like Truth Social, right? Isn't this like a much smaller like kind of ripoff of Twitter? Or am I wrong? I think Truth Social is this, but like it's a
very
much
close.
right.
Yeah.
It's a much smaller version of that. So if the creator and CEO of Truth Social comes out and they say, I don't want, as far as I can reasonably know, I don't want to assess or like I don't want to host like convicted felons on my platform or liberals or people who I identify to be part of like XYZ faction and stuff like that. I don't think people would really care. People would be like, well, Truth Social is their platform. They can't be compelled by the state or really even socially encouraged to host just anybody. They have freedom of association too. And people wouldn't care. But if it came to Twitter, and suddenly the CEO, like the boardroom of Twitter, is starting to say that we don't want convicted felons on our platform or we don't want conservatives. Just now it's just a matter of like practicality and size, where previously people would be defending like, well, as an owner of, and CEO of a social media company, you don't have to host anybody who you don't want to. But when it comes to Twitter, people are much more like, no, Twitter should basically be compelled to like host these people or not deplatform them so frivolously.
They're taking 230 protection, so it makes sense to some extent, right?
Okay.
Wick, are you asking a moral question or a pragmatic question?
Moral.
I don't know why 230 would mean you can't ban whatever uses you want to ban.
Well, no, I'm saying like not right now. I'm saying you could wrap that up in the obligation, right? So once you become like a social media company in which, hey, you're like distancing yourself from the statements that people make from like a liability perspective, as opposed to maybe like a smaller organization. I think you could all, working that into Section 230, where we're giving you that liability shield in exchange. You're also the public square now. You got to be pretty transparent about your TOS, and you can't just like act arbitrarily and remove people without explaining to them what they did. Pretty basic.
I don't understand. I've never understood the 230 arguments. It just seems insane to me. If I host a forum and I want to host a forum for like people that love cats and people step in and start posting dog pictures, am I not allowed to ban them now because I'm going to lose my Section 230 protections. I think the Section 230 arguments, I've never heard a good one in favor of that leads you to be stripped of these, or you're like all of a sudden not allowed to moderate your platform. Like I think Section 230 very explicitly applies to publishers. I don't think moderating your platform all of a sudden makes you a publisher. That seems weird to me.
Well,
230 encourages
to
moderation.
non-publishers, right? Because if you're a publisher, then you don't.
Or non-publishers. I mean, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
Look, I'll be one second.
If you're a publisher, you don't get the 230 protections. I don't know. The like the off-topic example, I think that's an interesting one where like, hey, this is a cat forum. Please keep it to cats. Perhaps that's something where there needs to be maybe some other form of like section involved. I don't know exactly what kind of scheme that would look like. I do know that when you have something like Twitter, which is a public forum of politics, where certain political views are repressed and certain other ones aren't. And we also existed not just a couple of years ago. We existed at a time in which a bunch of public places that a lot of these people would normally congregate was shut down by the government. Right? Where are you going to go if your shit was shut down by the government and you don't? Let's say you're uneducated with tech, you don't have a lot of you don't know of many alternatives. You just know about Facebook. So I'm going to create my own little Facebook thing. I mean, the government technically is pushing you into a private space at that point that benefits from 230 protections. I don't know. I don't think it's that unreasonable to expect Facebook to like accommodate that and to not just like ban the boomers because they put the color on the at the beginning.
So I'm not allowed then. I can't host a social media site that says like Progressive Circle, or I can't host a social media that says like MAGA for Trump. You're essentially saying you're not allowed to do that anymore. You'd ban all of that.
So any standard that would apply to Twitter, I would also apply to like Truth Social or
yeah, but I'm saying that I wouldn't be allowed. I couldn't host like a conservative message board. You'd ban that effectively in your world because that's what Section 230 protects. You should have the right to moderate your platform however you want. I don't. Yeah,
maybe this would be a compromise here. Like you can do that, but like I think there's a from like a fraud perspective, I guess there's a difference here when you are saying, okay, this is a conservative space. We are going to censor left-wing opinions. Just flat out, we're going to shadow ban you. We're going to actually ban you. We're not lying to you, okay? As opposed to Twitter, we're not shadow banning you. We're unbiased. We're this platform where everyone can express themselves, and then they're not.
Does Twitter present themselves as unbiased? I feel like their TOS and everything is like pretty. I think any reading of it would say, conservatives are probably going to get banned by this more. Like their misinformation policy, don't they tell you like what counts as misinformation? They've got like community notes and everything.
I haven't read the full Twitter TOS. So
Let me. That's a good question. Do or should social media companies, right, and corporations have to open source their algorithm? Like, should people and consumers have the right to know on the social media site that they're on what's going to get promoted and what's going to get demoted in the algorithm? Right? Should that be a thing that is required?
Or if I don't shadow ban.
Say that again, Sunday. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I didn't. Or what about shadow ban, Lockwood?
I said, or if they're going to shadow ban, they should probably like be transparent, right, before people spend a lot of time on a platform.
Well, I think Twitter is are they not? I thought they explicitly denied they shadow ban people.
They denied, and then the Twitter files demonstrated that they did. So they just lied. Yes, they just flat out. And then they argued about like the definition of shadow banning for like months. We're not shadow banning. We're just lowering the visibility of their posts.
What do you think, Sunday? Should companies be required, social media companies specifically, be required to open source their algorithm, or at least to make their algorithm visible?
What you asked initially was, do people have a right to know what their algorithms are?
Yes.
And it seems like there's like the question itself is a little bit circular. You're asking if people have a right to know what they have a right to, or if they don't have a right to it, should they divulge that information anyways? That doesn't seem to follow to me.
What I'm asking is, do people, right, do individuals, right, who go onto these social media companies in order to promote sometimes their businesses, sometimes their political beliefs, sometimes their ideas, whatever they want to say, do they have a right, or should they have a right, to know what sort of information is going to be promoted and what is going to be demoted?
I mean, I would say that I would like to have the ability to see that, but I don't think businesses are going to be likely to turn over algorithms, even under, like, I guess, duress technically by the state, because they're not going to want to disclose, like, business secrets now.
Well, the
and
reason
then
why
once it is leaked, then users could just game it to their advantage. Then you've just given somebody the framework, like, if you're a propagandist, here's the exact algorithm that you need to manipulate in order to actually effectively promote your message, if you're being shadow banned.
That's really well put, actually. That's my initial worry. But then the other one is, if you're asking, like, should they? It depends on how seriously I want to take your question. By reference to what? Like, by reference to what's best for the consumer, what's best for the user, or by reference to some like higher normal or legal? Like, I just don't know. I mean, like, objectively, not. There's no judge that's going to say that they have to, as of right now.
Okay. Fair enough. I don't know if I agree personally. I think that
Well, then what? Yeah, please
the
elaborate.
algorithm, so when you buy a product, right? When you buy a car and something, right? You have a right to know about, or you should, right? Do a thorough check to make sure that the person who is selling you that car isn't lying to you, right? So if you go on a social media something believing that your information, your business is going to be promoted, and you will have your voice, um, as long as you don't break the moderation or whatever. And then because you haven't broken moderation, but you've done such things that the algorithm demotes you, right? Like, isn't that the same as buying a car where someone's been tampering with the odometer?
Well, the
Isn't that
flip
a
side,
similar situation?
the mirror of that, though, is that the algorithm promotes other people, and that's always going to be at the unpromoted person's expense. Does that count as demotion?
Well, the question I'm asking is, should you know, like, should everyone be given the rules, right? Everyone be giving a clear rules. So whether you take the time to look through the algorithm and to monopolize or to uh,
We're also, just very quickly to interject there, we're also presuming that the effects of the algorithms are even known specifically to the people who are employing it, right? Like, they don't know. They didn't know specifically, or they at least had no answer as to why conservative viewpoints were being magnified over left wing ones. This was treated as like a surprise. So
Right,
I
that's the other thing is that like unless you can intimate from the algorithms that are made public, unless there's going to be some way to determine like explicit coding directions that are like that have bigotry built into them, you could have this transparency, but that doesn't mean you're going to have people who could tell you whether or not the algorithm is fair, right?
I mean, if I may, just very quickly, sorry, I just want to jump this before I forget it. The very fact that we're even talking about any kind of algorithm affecting the outcomes of discussions, or of magnifying or demagnifying certain voices, directly contradicts the very idea that something like Twitter can even function as a town square. Because at this point, it's not even just people who are now having a say; it's automated processes that are whose activities may be beyond the understanding of even the people who made them.
beyond the understanding of the people who made them. Okay,
Yeah.
I want to reset a little bit. I don't think anyone's biting on this question. Um, does deplatforming and censorship even work?
Yes.
How so? What do you mean by that?
Well, if you're playing a specifically media game and you're trying to garner sympathy and followers over a vast expanse of space, and your sole medium for doing so is via your social media account, removing that social media account neuters your reach. That seems
Well,
pretty intuitive. Studies have borne
Wick,
this
what do you
out.
mean by work? By work, because in terms of like whether or not it's like effective, obviously it is, but whether or not you should be doing it or like whether or not it's moral would be a different question altogether.
I think both, right? So for example, they have deplatformed many people on the manosphere. Many conservative voices have been deplatformed 4 times the rate, right? But
Mhm.
these ideas haven't gone away. If anything, they have been gotten stronger, right? It's fed into this kind of oppressor narrative that they have,
Well,
right? So,
it seems the
mm,
situation you're dealing with there is not that deplatforming hasn't worked. It's that deplatforming hasn't actually taken place. Someone has been removed or limited on some platform and has meanwhile held an extreme amount of influence on another platform. And so they've been able to rhetorically deploy the deplatforming here over here as a propaganda tool. So you actually can't tell if the deplatforming worked at all because it never actually took place. They were removed from one medium, but they weren't actually depersoned in the way we typically tend to think of when we talk about like total deplatforming. So the issue here is of like, once again, because there is no public square, these are different mediums controlled by different people whose motives we do not fully understand. Um, because of that, uh, nobody is actually getting fully deplatformed at all. So there's actually no commitment to a policy of deplatforming any one party across the board. And this speaks again to the international state of things, because even if somebody is totally deplatformed, and this is where, for example, like this actually becomes a positive. If someone is deplatformed unjustly by the state, they can nonetheless have an international voice from somewhere else. So
I want to agree. I want to agree with Straighterated with the idea of like, what do you mean by work? Does it? Are you silencing a whole bunch of people? Yeah, right. Are you preventing people from hearing whatever they want to hear? Yes, you are. But I think there's like a smaller subset of people who, maybe they're a little bit more engaged. They take a little bit more time to research. They take a little bit more time to like be skeptical, and they find out that like, yeah, you've banned this, and that makes them more skeptical, right? Because when somebody's hiding the ball, at least for me, right, when I'm reading an article and I notice that like paragraph after paragraph they're not saying something, right? That's like the natural implication of what I'm looking for. They're just not saying it, and then I get to the end and it wasn't said at all. Wow. My intuition is that's true. My intuition is that's true because they're not saying it and they don't want to say that, because that truth is counter to the actual intention of the article. And so yeah, so I think for like a smaller group of people, it might radicalize them even further, right? So I mean, there are examples of topics where I am incredibly skeptical, primarily because there was so much censorship regarding certain things surrounding certain events that I don't even know if I can talk about on this fucking platform. So,
but the
Well,
censorship is known to you, though. The censorship is like a fact in your world. So they clearly haven't been totally censored, because you're aware of the party that has been censored. You're aware of what they have been saying that they are not allowed to say.
right,
Somehow that
because
has
of their
reached your
inefficiency,
ears.
right? Like, oh, like I see somebody like posting some shit, and then all of a sudden tomorrow it's gone,
No,
and they're
exactly.
banned.
But what I'm saying though is that the social consequences of that, when it's radicalizing people a little bit further, that's directly the consequence of deplatforming not having been carried out. So they haven't
Well, no,
actually
I think
been.
we don't have to have an absolutist point of deplatforming. Like, if somebody's been banned from Facebook, but they haven't been banned from like Twitter or YouTube, they've been deplatformed, but not completely, right?
Well, sure, but I mean, the question of deplatforming working sort of assumes that it's not being undermined by some other equal platform lifting them up. If you want to actually judge whether or not deplatforming could work, um, like its function, which is to remove the platform from the person,
Mhm.
has to be fulfilled to some extent. And I don't see much of a strong distinction between someone's been banned off Twitch but not off YouTube.
Well, I mean, in that
We
case,
have
then it's just like
audiences
our
that bleed
definition
into
of
each other.
yeah, but our definition of deplatforming then basically has to be like, is somebody getting killed or not, right? Because unless you're actually murdering somebody, you're not going to completely remove them. Like, everybody's going to be able to make some kind of account on
Well,
Gab or
how
Truth
about
Social.
Stefan Molyneux? So he's been removed from like a wide variety of things
Mhm.
simultaneously, and his influence is dead.
Yeah, but he could probably still make an account on Rumble. I don't think he's been there, right?
Yeah, but Rumble is a recent thing, right? That's so once again, like once it's
Or
undermined by
Gab
another
or Truth
platform,
Social,
sure.
right? I'm saying that
And
like,
it's
so
true.
he's not really. So in your definition, he's not truly deplatformed because he could make an account elsewhere. He just hasn't, right?
But the issue is like with
Yeah.
these manosphere types that have been deplatformed, there's always obfuscation. So like Steven Crowder, for example. So he went around calling Carlos Maza like a lesbian queer and maybe even like the F slur. Um, but he would make it sound like, oh, I was deplatformed or whatever because of like dangerous ideas or something like that. And it was like, no, I mean, you were deplatformed because you were harassing somebody on the basis of their sexual orientation. Or like Sneeko, for example. I think the thing that got him on YouTube was not because he was talking about pickup artistry or like red pill ideas. Wasn't it because he made a rape joke basically against another like female content creator? Like regardless
No, I
of
think
partisan
what got him banned
affiliation, that's
was,
going to get you swatted.
I think for it was a COVID misinformation that eventually got him,
Okay.
or election denialism or something is one of those things.
Lactoid-like studies. So a few months ago, we actually did a bit of a research dive into a bunch of studies that were looking at the effects of deplatforming on radicalization.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. One of the side consequences of deplatforming in this otherwise neuter sense, where they're off one platform but on another, like a general culture of, if you say X, Y, and Z in this particular manner, you will be demagnified or you will be removed, that kind of thing. One of the consequences of that is that people who have ideas or who have arguments that would otherwise run afoul of the censors now are forced to pad them out. So they either have to couch them in more acceptable terms,
Right.
they have to limit the extent of their claims, and they have to like remove language, like slurs, for example, which would have the efficient effect of depersoning like certain groups or of helping people sort of target their anger on
Yes.
specific
Okay.
parties.
Let me be more specific because I think we're all missing it. I understand that you can hurt someone individually. You can
No, no,
take
no.
it
There was
individually.
I was getting to a point with this though. So what they
Okay.
actually found with the studies is that as a consequence of this, the actual growth of monitored extremist spaces online was stunted entirely. They became more extremist because less dilute, because fewer moderates were finding them. But as a consequence of them having to sanitize their rhetoric in order to stay on these mainstream platforms, their efficacy in bringing together a bunch of people and of radicalizing them en masse was sharply diminished.
Even though they have like the talking point now of like they're coming for us, because that's all I see for like from the people pretty much anywhere who have been like deplatformed, right? You have like Tate who's ranting about like how the Matrix is coming to get him, and when Crowder talked about it too. When
Oh, that's been
he
around
got,
forever.
right, but like there must be some, I don't know, there must be some kind of
Yep.
beneficial
Even
reason for pointing that out.
they don't like. I mean, I feel like again, I'm more principled that like just because they personally don't follow the spirit of it themselves, I don't think that they should be frivolously deplatformed. But Fresh and Fit was going around, I'm pretty sure, just spamming copyright claims to all of these channels that they didn't want to engage with the criticism of. Ab and Preach was one of them. They attempted to hit them with like 20 frivolous copyright claims in an attempt to like quell criticism, but then they turn around and say like, oh, people are trying to cancel us or whatever. So it's not even like they have some principled opposition to like cancellation or whatever. They just as soon do it themselves if they could, you know.
I think that's a separate issue, right? Like I don't believe almost anyone is actually for free speech. I think they're for their free speech and their enemies need to be silenced.
That's
Um,
not completely true. So there was recently a poll that just came out,
mm,
and now we're controlling for students, right? So let's just, I understand it's like a different demographic, but at least in my state, among my public university system, the disparities between political beliefs and like which political demographics were okay with people of the opposite political demographics speaking their mind and talking about what they believed and whether or not their ideas were dangerous and whether or not those ideas should even be allowed in the first place or whether or not administrators should step in if they say things that push forward this particular agenda. The differences were stark, right? Like generally speaking, it appears, at least in my state, but I think I would be confident enough to say this across all of America, that like the right tends to be a little bit more tolerant here when it comes to like accepting other people saying their shit as long as they get to say their own shit as well.
Yeah, but maybe
I
that's
think that
because
is absolutely not true.
I
Um,
was
I think that the right is just as, if not worse than the left when it comes to censoring speech. The only problem is right now they're losing. So of course
The
now they
far
want to
right or like just one of the mill like conservatives?
normal stock conservatives.
well, I was
Super.
just
So
to add to
let-
that very quickly. Let's assume that
think
you're
that's
right,
true.
Lactoid. Okay, is there an equivalent study that also shows like how many of those people also actively advocate for the marginalizing of entire groups of people?
well,
Like maybe the reason.
even ignoring that, I mean,
Yeah,
just
more.
real quick on the freedom of speech thing, conservatives, when they have the ability to censor, like, it's funny because we can say, like, well, here's a poll. Conservatives right now are actually more tolerant of other points of view than progressives are. I think it's just because conservatives are on the losing side of it. If you look at where they do have power, like, what are they trying to do throughout states? Ban medical treatment for adults related to trans stuff. Ban books from different schools. Matt Walsh and I think Ben Shapiro was retweeting that somebody, Lizzo, should be arrested for having performers on stage fully clothed in drag. Right? That's like more authoritarian than most left-leaning stuff I've heard recently. So I think when conservatives do have the power, they will flex it in highly highly censorship-prone ways. They just right now they don't. So.
I think
I think
there's
you
a lot
made
of context behind some of the things that were just said. When we're talking about like the banning books in where kids are, like elementary school libraries, I think that's completely different. Like controlling reading.
why?
lists.
What's the difference?
Well, because the difference is when we mandate that children go to education or are educated, right? We enforce that as a law. Like if it's a public school education, it would make sense that the public gets to have a little bit of a say as to what the kids are being educated on. Right?
Yeah, that's fine.
This is not like a freedom of expression like issue when we're like dictating what books get to go like in an elementary school library necessarily compared to what a college campus system, which is supposed to be the like where ideas are challenged, where you have the vast majority of left-leaning people who think that right-leaning people should not be able to say their ideas, or if they do, kicked off campus. Right? It's just
Okay,
completely
so
different magnitudes.
what I was going to say, actually, thank you, Destiny, for that. That dovetails very nicely with the point I was trying to make. Um, it may be the case that they appear on paper to be more accepting of other people espousing their ideas, because they're presuming the depersoning of most of the people they actually care about in the first place. So once again, they're, as Stephen adequately put, like immediately once in power, their immediate go-to is ban the books, ban discussion of X, Y, and Z, terminate these university departments, and so on and so forth. They say like, hey, we're for the equalizing of the university, want more diversity of thought. But in practice, that's just because they only view diversity of thought as being between a few liberal professors on campus and Tucker Carlson.
No.
And conservatives totally dug their own grave with this one, because if you are championing like deregulation, right, the thing that would actually keep more conservatives on social media would be more regulation, would be more of an incentive or compulsion for these private media groups to host them. So, you can't have that one both ways. And then didn't Trump, by executive action, attempt to revoke 230? Right? I know it wasn't enforced.
He was threatening it. He was threatening it unless like the social media companies didn't didn't what he believed to be like be fair, right? Start being fair.
Yeah, but like what he doesn't even, they couldn't even enforce it because they didn't know how to go about.
Trump also said he wanted to open up libel laws to sue
I
mainstream media. He also tweeted that he wanted to put people in jail for or revoke their citizenship for burning a flag. So yeah, I don't know.
I don't dislike Trump, but I would consider him to be like a little bit further right. I'm just going off of like your run-of-the-mill conservatives compared to like your run-of-the-mill liberals or left-wingers. I don't know. For some reason, lefties don't like to be called liberals because of the classical implication. But I think what I see is that, yes, there seems to be like a pretty like milquetoast conservative onus on controlling what ideas children get, especially outside of the family unit. I think that's just, when we're talking about children, like with most things, that's just fundamentally different when we're talking about expression of one's body or expression of one's mind or expression of any ideas that you want to share with somebody else. And a college campus, like a system, is just, I think, different again than like an elementary school classroom or like a drag show where children are, in the audience, which that seems to be like, those are the rallying points in which conservatives are like getting pissed off.
So you think
the flag thing, by the way, that seems to be like, I don't disagree with you that that's a weird fucking, like, despite believing in the First Amendment, I think more strongly and being better on free speech generally, for some reason that fucking issue the conservatives are not as good at.
Well,
so the better on
just real quick, I just don't believe it. I don't buy it, because it feels like conservatives will start with these things, but they use it as a pretext to always go a little bit further. So for instance, you say it's just about kids. Okay, fine. Well, then why are states trying to ban hormone treatments for adults? Right? Or people say it's just about kids being exposed to drag. Okay, fine. Well, then why are some states like Texas trying to get the entire state to ban all drag performances? Like, even without children in the audience. Like, it feels like it's always a pretext to go further. And it feels like, oh, you actually don't care about freedom of speech or even kids. This is just the pretext you're using to start to like insert your anti-free speech ideas.
Okay,
on that point.
So wait,
I want to let Lactoid respond to that. I'm curious what he has to say. Sunday, you'll get your turn. I promise you. You talk a lot. Okay.
No, I won't. This is a farce, Arkansas.
So what was just said is news to me. I quick Google, every single link is saying restricting sexual conduct and drag in front of minors. Like, very consistently, that seems to be every single.
All right, let me check. I could be wrong on that.
Now, if it's, by the way, if it is true that there's
Tennessee becomes first U.S. state to ban public drag performances
in front of minors, or just generally.
It says, while the word drag does not appear in the bill, it changes the definition of adult cabaret in Tennessee's law to mean adult-oriented performances that are harmful to minors. But I don't know if this is saying it's only banning them in front of minors.
I've read that bill, and that's like that fucking bill is like one of the most misrepresented. Like, multiple times people ask me, well, doesn't this mean that? No, it's basically classifying like sexually explicit drag shows under a adult cabaret performance. So minors aren't allowed to be there. Again,
wait, it also says, hold on, to be clear, it also says male or female impersonators now fall under adult cabaret among topless dancers, go-go dancers, and exotic dancers. The bill bans adult
No.
cabaret from public property or anywhere minors might be present.
I don't even have the bill up, but you're missing a sentence when you say like people performing as the other gender or like cross-dressing. There is a section there which is, I forget the exact word they use, but the legal translation is in a sexualized manner, right? Which is the exact.
So you trust the government to determine when a dress is dressing up in a sexualized manner?
If someone's behaving in a sexualized manner, it's the exact same like tests that we use to determine.
But what does that mean?
Yeah,
a trans woman in a belly shirt, is that
What's
acting in a sexualized manner?
You're right. Like, what is ultimately like the sexual nature of like a strip club? Like where is the line between like breastfeeding and stripping? Right? There is like, again, like with the definition of pornography, with the definition of sexuality, there is like a gray area, and it's very difficult, right? But like one of the concepts here is. And how this is going to be enforced, I guess I predict, I can't know for sure, but if it's enforced, how that word is enforced everywhere else in Tennessee, it's going to be whether or not this is a sexualized performance. If you're gyrating your hips like together in front of a bunch of like 5-year-olds, maybe that's a problem. I don't think that's like on par with like restricting freedom of speech in terms of banning university like Republicans from like hosting ideas that left-wingers don't like.
Wait, what was that important sentence that you said was missing?
Hold on, I'll bring up the actual bill.
Okay, while he does that, right? Do we think like that ideas or books should be banned for children? Like specifically, is outside of the sexual realm. Let's remove sexuality from this. So, other than sexuality, do you think we should be banning concepts like teaching about the Holocaust or anything like that from children's libraries or schools under a certain age, like kindergarten? Like, should kindergartners be learning about the Holocaust, right?
Is this a free speech issue, though? I feel like this is just going to come down to like curriculum.
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily a censorship issue, though, to say, like, for example, we shouldn't be teaching like issues around sexual assault to people in grade 1. That doesn't necessarily mean that we should make like materials unavailable to, for whatever reason, like somebody in grade 1 who has reason to research this topic. But I don't think it would necessarily be appropriate as a part of a curriculum.
Okay, fair enough. But as I understand it, the Stop Woke Act doesn't just remove it from the curriculum, but removes it from school libraries and things like that. Is that incorrect?
I mean, the removal from the library would be bad, but I don't think that like educators making the determination that kindergarten is not the appropriate grade level for students to be learning about like certain historical events is tantamount to like censorship or book burning or anything like that.
I think the minor status of the kids involved is kind of an issue here. Can we move this up a couple grades? Because now we're talking about like traumatizing kids versus curating what's appropriate for people to learn first, right?
Well, I think Chaga.
And I would like to quickly, just because I found the sentence, right? So it's about whether or not it appeals to a prurient interest, which is a sexual interest, whether or not it appeals to sexuality.
Wait. But is it now classifying that men and women that cross-dress are essentially doing so? Can you link what you're looking at in the group chat?
Yep, absolutely.
Let's see this.
We get to find out together, gang.
I got to do it on my phone. I'll put it.
Learning with Lactoid.
Yeah, I'll post it because again, like, it's kind of interesting though because let's just say I'm right. Let's just say I'm right. Technically, you all just participated in misinformation. Maybe you should get banned, right?
Well, was the difference between misinformation and disinformation, right? I think disinformation would be what you're promoting if you got this wrong.
Well, this is
from
question,
the Tennessee
right?
website, right? Wait, you didn't make a group chat, or I'm not part of it.
Oh, I forgot to add you. I'm sorry. Sorry.
I was looking for it. I was like, what the
I had unfortunately again, Lactoid is the last minute replacement.
Who's this Gideon person, by the way?
They're welcome to come in.
No, I think he's just trolling. I don't know why everybody thought he was seriously wanted it.
I don't know what he'd have to add to this discussion, but he'd be welcome to do so. I guess while we're getting that up, and I think he just posted it there. Let me see if I can't share it with a. this is a whole. Do you have a line or something I can go to?
Yep. So how this works is you have to, it's bill history, amendments, video, and then click on summary. If you go to bill summary, it explains what the bill is, right? So this bill creates an offense for a person who engages in an adult cabaret performance on public property or in a location where the adult cabaret performance could be viewed by a person who is not an adult. The bill defines.
Okay, go on. Sorry.
The bill defines an adult cabaret performance to mean a performance in a location other than an adult cabaret, like a strip club, that features topless dancers, go-go dancers, exotic dancers, strippers, male or female impersonators who provide entertainment that appeals to a prurient interest or similar entertainers, regardless of whether or not performed for consideration.
So if a trans woman wears a slim-fitting dress and sings on a stage outside of a cabaret environment, would they run afoul of this?
No, because the actual entertainment is not one that appeals to a prurient interest, which is a
Well, that's a
sexual
matter
interest.
of judgment, no? Like, the reason why I say form-fitting outfit is precisely because a form-fitting outfit is one that shows off your form. That's directly
Okay.
appealing to a prurient interest.
So
They're not wearing a. They're not.
I
wearing,
don't.
like,
I don't know if I want to
parka.
debate the ins
right,
and outs of
but
this bill
here's
right
the
now.
thing: if we want to play like ultimate skeptic, there, you could also read that technically anybody who wears a slim-fitting dress then it goes to sing could technically be they're violating this, and so therefore we can't have rules against strippers, right?
No, you're misunderstanding me. You have an interest in this being much more specific because your position is that it's a bad thing that, for example, along similarly ambiguous lines, conservatives are being removed from social media.
Hold on, I want to fight over this for a second.
Go ahead.
Sure.
I disagree. I think that a Republican would say that every drag show is necessarily sexual. I think that they would just say that.
Well, the question is what qualifies as a drag show. So I wouldn't necessarily trust a Republican to distinguish between
People,
trans women.
a person saying, "I'm going to do a reading time in the square dressed in drag," because for any
No,
of
no,
these
but
other...
the question, Stephen,
wait,
is
let's
not.
just-
no, wait. I want to lactoid. Okay, hold on. Lactoid. There is no case that anybody in any of these outfits, an exotic dancer, a go-go dancer, a stripper, could go and do anything else, and it wouldn't be considered something that appeals to prurient interests, right? They'd still consider it as such.
No, that's the disagreement we have. So the
hold on, no.
entertainment
So let's
itself,
say-
the entertainment itself has to appeal to prurient interest. So if you're going,
Sure. So
to
let's say
drag
that
queen-
strippers.
if you're-
Let's say that.
if you're going to drag queen reading hour, like
Yeah.
reading to kids, is that like is that sexual entertainment?
What about strippers playing volleyball?
So strippers playing volleyball, are they like? I guess it depends. Like, are they nude while they're playing volleyball?
No,
Are they,
they're
like,
dressed
wearing
as strippers,
pasties?
though.
Are they paying
They're
for
dressed
wearing
as strippers.
pasties?
Sure, they've got pasties. They're dressed as strippers. It says strippers in the bill. They're dressed as strippers.
Would we allow this like in a public area now?
I'm asking you, by the language of the bill, the stripper is banned from doing so. Not because it's necessarily doing a strip show,
Also the
but because of
go-go
the
dancer.
outfit. What?
Well, also like the go-go dancer, right?
Would probably be as well,
right,
yeah.
So again, like this is one of the issues we run into when it comes to defining pornography or like defining like sexual grooming or any of this shit, where like it does rely a little bit on like now you might just not trust like the intuition or the common sense of Republicans.
Well, no, hold on. I'm just going by the legally what you've said, right? So the amendment to this bill, right? The way that this particular bill was amended was the word male or female impersonators were added to this. Those weren't there before. That was part of the amendment, right? So if they're adding that, but you're telling me, oh, no, it's only performances of a sexual nature. Why would you need to add male or female impersonators there? I imagine it probably wouldn't matter whether they were doing a sexual performance or not, regardless of, right?
I can ask you the exact same question, Destiny, right? So if they just meant that male and female impersonators are just naturally doing everything sexualized, then why did they have to include a sentence, who provide entertainment that appeals to a prurient interest? Right? When people add little like modifiers, like this is like statutory interpretation. When people add modifiers to like things, what that usually means is there's an intention behind that. And when you're
but appealing to a prurient
interest,
interest could mean the difference between, for example, them having to wear like full formal wear or wearing bikinis while they're playing volleyball. The reason why
it could be argued that WIC panels appeal to prurient interests. That could be argued, right?
No,
like,
because
some would say.
So the reason why that matters though is because like, is it now simply the case that any trans woman who dresses in female getup is now going to be targeted as being a female impersonator who's appealing to prurient interests? Because it seems like the impersonating itself, I don't know, like judging by how it's discussed, it seems like that itself is equivocated with appealing to a prurient interest. This is why drag queen.
Why are they all wrong?
Despite the fact that they may be wearing like
why are they all
full
wrong?
Mary Poppins garb, may nonetheless be characterized as a like
Yeah,
having a sexualized performance in front of children.
I'm sure that's
And
what they meant.
is drag
So-
clothing even sexual in nature to you, Lactoid?
So I guess we don't know for sure how, like with every single statute ever, like with every statute against child molestation, with every single statute against drug dealing, with every single statute against anything ever. We don't know exactly how it's going to be interpreted. We don't know exactly how it's going to be enforced. We don't know the specifics of everything. You know, how the jury's rule is going to like also have like an impact on how these things turn out practically. I don't disagree, right? But I'm just going to tell you, based on my reading of this, right, what's like the proper statutory interpretation here. They're not just saying male and female impersonators. That's part of like strippers, and that's part of everybody who has to like go under an adult cabaret performance. They are specifically modifying that sentence with only if they're performing entertainment. The entertainment being one of a sexual interest, one of a sexual prurient
I understand what you're saying, but it feels like
And
that language
so-
is only there to say that they're like doing a show of some sort. That's what it's there for. So like a stripper
Right.
walking in public, maybe. But my guess is going to be that the way that Republicans perceive drag is any type of show.
Well, so this is why originalism is the best legal philosophy. Because
Well, we're not talking originalism.
Well,
Understand,
I'll
like-
explain why. I'll explain why. Because when they're interpreting this, right, the reasonable thing would do is, why did they make this? Why did they include that little thing? And what is the context of the time that they included it? Well, the context of the time was like a whole bunch of like controversy about the fact that you had like Drag Queen Christmas, where you had like people literally wearing giant fake tits and grinding like their genitals in front of like small children, which is like highly sexual. This is a
How about
highly
this?
prurient
Yeah,
entertainment.
but my guess is going to be that stuff like that is probably already prosecutable. There's probably already bills in Tennessee.
No, it's not. They didn't.
No,
they,
I can go in Tennessee prior to this bill, which, by the way, doesn't even account for that. Let's say prior to this, I could walk up to a child and start rubbing my dick in front of a kid, and because, oh, you didn't put like the dick rubbing and sweatpants part clause in the bill, I'm not going to get in trouble for it? I don't think so.
Yeah, if you did that specific thing, I don't know. I'm not an expert on Tennessee, like that any specific anti-child molestation Tennessee statutes. What I'm saying is that generally speaking in these states, like drag queens going up on stage and like gyrating their genitals on each other and wearing these great big old fake tits and acting in an incredibly sexual nature, and there was minors there, I mean, they haven't been prosecuted. And so there has been like a little bit of a backlash to this. Well, like, oh shit, we don't want this happening in our state, or we don't want this happening in our state again, right? Because DeSantis decertified the area that did that in Florida. And then you have Tennessee who's like, well, we don't want that to happen here, so we're going to pass this bill to make sure it doesn't happen. We're going to include.
I'd be interested in looking at that, but I super don't think you're right. I don't think so.
Then why did they pass this? Why did they include?
Because they don't want
sexual prurient or a prurient
No, they
interest
didn't.
here.
It's not. You're focused so much on that. That language was already there, the prurient interest. But look at what other classifications that are they're being compared to, right? These things are necessarily and inherently by what they are sexual. Topless dancers, go-go dancers, exotic dancers, strippers, and cross-dressers. Like, that's being classified with all of those. No matter what performance any of those other people are doing, these people are probably going to get in trouble if they're doing a performance in a public area. It's necessarily going to be prurient interest. Somebody dressed as a stripper.
What's a go-go dancer?
I don't know, but it's probably some sexual.
What's a mailer lactoid?
If it's sandwiched between topless dancer and exotic dancers and stripper, my guess is a go-go dancer probably wears incredibly sexually provocative clothing insofar as Tennessee sees it. That's gonna be my guess.
She wears like a bikini and dances in front of people, and if she's dancing sexually to like a sexual interest, then that would be a problem, right? Just like.
Well, how about this, lactoid? How about this? I'm gonna give you two examples, okay? A volleyball tournament on a beach involving women in swimsuits. The swimsuits are various, whatever they brought with them from home. Some are in bikinis, some are in one pieces. Some have those weird frilly things from the 30s, okay? Prurient interest, public volleyball competition. They're at the very least showing lower leg, every single one of them. Is that appealing to a prurient interest?
It doesn't matter if it's appealing to prurient interest because I don't think it's defined as an adult cabaret performer. That's the point, right?
Yeah. Well, no, you would have to like prove that they like that there's a sexual intent here. They're appealing to a prurient interest, and by the way, it's a misdemeanor. So like you would also prove that like they intend to do this, right? They intended to like appeal to a sexual nature.
No, I understand, but like
you could do when you're like got great big old fake tits and you're gyrating your genitals in front of fourth graders.
Okay, well this is where the other example is going from. Because we can imagine, for example, a sexy volleyball competition being displayed on a cabaret stage for the titillation of the audience. What if we have the exact same scenario, but they're trans women?
Should kids be at that?
Variety of dress.
Let me ask you, Sunday. Should kids be at that? At a sexy volleyball competition? Should kids be there? in your opinion?
Well, I'm not defining a volleyball competition at the beach as a sexy volleyball competition at the beach.
Say it was a wet t-shirt contest, sexy volleyball. They're gonna do the wet t-shirt thing where they wear the t-shirt, get sprayed with water, and then go out and do volleyball, right?
That event is coded sexually, so by dint of the branding, no. But for example, we wouldn't say that kids shouldn't go to the beach because they might encounter women with bikinis there.
Or particular cheerleading performances at sporting events.
No, because those people aren't called out here. The adult cabaret performance is defined here to mean a performance. What?
Technically, they could fall under go-go dancer because a go-go dancer is a very broad category of people who dance at like entertainment venues.
Well, the reason why I'm pushing back on this, Stephen, is because like adult cabaret, what's intended for an adult cabaret, is endless because anything can be simulated for the titillation of an audience on such a stage. There's like a massive scope for interpretation there.
Yeah, no, you've got to take a step back for a second, right? And I this is one of the difficult things with like defining pornography or defining like something sexualized is like you do have to like take a step back and look at it like, is this appealing to a primarily sexual interest? Is this appealing to what is the purpose of them doing this? Is the purpose of them like gyrating their genitals on each other? Is there like something sexual about that? Are they like trying to be sexual to like the audience? Is the entertainment, is the actual performance like built to appeal to somebody's sexual interest? If that's the case,
the language added
that's different than like somebody with just a bikini, okay? Because that's not how it's been defined before, and that this bill doesn't change it to be defined that way.
Adding the cross-dressing thing just doesn't make sense. They're trying to ban drag, right? So I'm linking you to another part of the Tennessee Code, okay? This is 2021. I don't know if the language has been updated. But like, if we look down here, right, this defines, if we look at like how it's defining adult stuff or adult cabaret or adult entertainment, it seems like broadly what they're really talking about is stripping. That's what it seems like they're really talking about.
You put that in the group chat as well. I want to see that.
I dropped it in the group chat.
Included strippers,
right?
But they're not.
No. Broadly speaking, they're talking about stripping, right? Topless dancers, go-go dancers, exotic dancers, strippers. And then they put in male or female impersonators. And then adult entertainment means any exhibition of any adult-oriented motion picture, live performance, display, or dance of any type that has as a significant or substantial portion of such performance, any actual or simulated performance of specified sexual activities, including the removal of articles of clothing or appearing unclothed. So earlier you gave the example that somebody was rubbing their crotch in front of a child's place or whatever. This sounds like a simulated performance of a specified sexual activity, so it would have been illegal before. And removing articles of clothing sounds like things you would do in regards to like a strip show, an adult cabaret. So I don't know why you would add male or female impersonators here. Any types of these sexual performances happening before, I can't think of any examples that wouldn't have already been caught under this bill. It sounds like you're just trying to ban drag.
The reason why, and there could be like a specific intent there for sure. But again, like the reason why is because recently this has been happening more. And I think it's wrong.
But if somebody was doing that in front of a kid, you would have already been able to charge them with a misdemeanor. I'm positive of that. There's no shot that I could go up in front of a kid. As long as I'm dressed like a man, I can do sexual activities, simulated sexual activities in front of the child and be okay. That's got to be, you can't have to pass an anti-drag amendment to existing legislation to make that illegal. There's
So hold on. Is your argument that it's redundant, or is your argument that it's
No.
like
My argument is not that
anti-free
it's.
speech? Like, what
My
is it?
argument is that in your world is pointless because your interpretation doesn't make sense. In my world, they're just trying to ban all public performances of drag. In which case, it makes perfect sense. They're trying to ban drag. Otherwise, why would you add cross-dressers to topless dancers, go-go dancers, exotic dancers, or strippers performing adult entertainment like simulated sexual acts or removing articles of clothing to appear unclothed?
Yeah. So
it seems like you're just trying to ban drag.
Sure. That's one way of taking a look at it. Okay. I just think the context of when this came out is very different, right? This was like right on the heels of, at the time, like a number of incredibly sexualized and provocative drag performances in which there was children in the audience. And
What
people,
number?
And people. They had a whole tour, right? You can look at.
To be clear, I don't.
Christmas.
I don't think this happened.
I'm
not buying it.
I can link
How
you that
does this
too.
not sound like a moral panic, like Lactoid?
Okay.
Like,
No,
under
I
this, like-
don't think this ever happened. I don't think that there were. I think that this is my guess. Is going to be there's pictures from the shows or different shows, and there might have been kids in the audience, and people were making sexually suggestive things. But I don't think somebody was doing a highly sexually suggestive thing right in front of a kid, and there's not a misdemeanor statute that you couldn't charge that person on. I don't believe
They were
that.
doing
Well,
it.
exactly.
No. They were doing it on a stage, and there was children in the audience. Yes.
Okay, Lactoid. Let's assume that is completely true. Once again, back to Stephen's point. No. Once again, back to Stephen's point. Even if that is completely true, the reason why that would be a problem is because they are engaging in simulated sexual activity in front of an audience. the wording of what you just posted suggests that the bare fact
I was gonna respond
of
to that.
dressing in the garb traditionally associated with the opposite sex counts as a cabaret-like performance. It seems like not just you want to ban drag, it seems like you want to ban any male-bodied person from appearing in public wearing a dress.
Any cross-dressing person, or at least doing any type of performance, not just appearing there, because it seems like a stripper could walk in public, but when it comes to doing any sort of performance, it feels like any performance relating to drag, because this has been added inappropriately. I'm at it. It doesn't, because it doesn't. Like if you read this section, none of this sounds like it has anything to do with people cross-dressing.
Has this bill been passed, by the way? Is it gone through the legislation?
It was an amendment to the bill, and the first website that he linked is the updated Tennessee code, criminal code. So yes, it is part of it.
So has there been any prosecutions? Has there been any?
My understanding is that it may have been temporarily blocked. I don't know on what grounds.
Okay.
Because
that would be my question. That would solve it, right?
That's again, like I think I already said this. Like ultimately, we will need to see like exactly how this plays out, like with all statutes. But when you look at like what is the intent? What are they trying to target? What is the intent? Now, I think one reading of this is, well, trans people just can't like be in public anymore, which
can't do public. Don't be charitable to my point. Can't do any public performances.
Sure. Can't do any performance just because they happen to be in drag, right?
Correct.
So while Lizzo,
that's one interpretation.
Just real quick, stop. So while Lizzo, for example, was called out by Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, apparently, right? And I saw the Matt Walsh one, haven't seen the Ben Shapiro one, saying you should arrest her because she's violating the Tennessee law, right? Has any arrest been made? Has any action on this bill been taken by the enforcement mechanisms in the state? Because if this is just a thing about as lactoid claims to stop sexual performances, right? Then you probably wouldn't see much. But if it was, to Sunday's and Destiny's point, simply an excuse to ban all drag performances, surely we'd have seen some prosecution on that, some action. Something, right? Something?
No reasonable person is going to read it that way. That's the problem. Like when they're actually trying to enforce it, it's just not going to.
What do you? Okay.
You disagree?
No, I agree. No reasonable person would. I don't consider conservatives reasonable, and I think it's pretty obvious what they're trying to do with the bill is they're trying to ban all public performances of drag. Like that's what they're talking about over and over again, like drag story hour and blah blah blah. Like these are the topics that are coming up over and over again, and that was the onus under which this was added. Again, if you read the other categories of people that are considered like performing these adult performances, cross-dressing just doesn't fit. They're talking about strippers, go-go dancers, doing highly sexualized things. Like, why would you add cross-dressing? That's so weird.
It fits when you look at like the context of what was that bill in response to? What was happening at the time that like they were like, oh fuck, we got to pass these bills. It was a whole bunch of like highly sexualized drag performances, and
highly sexualized.
The one that I'm thinking of in Florida, right? Like perhaps one of the reasons why they wanted to really specify this was the case, in case like, well, we're gonna like get around some of the statutes by like we're not gonna absolutely like simulate sexual activity, but we are gonna have great big like paper mache tits. And we're gonna fly.
Okay, hang on.
Those types of things probably would have already been illegal under Tennessee law.
Okay, hang on. So it looks like the bill was only effective as of last month on the 22nd. So there's like no time has transpired yet. I don't think we can really know one way or the other at this point.
I mean, it's a whole month.
By this metric.
And
if they arrest like the drag queen story hour and like lead her out, and yeah, I mean that would be, I think, a gross misunderstanding of the intent of this law, and I don't think that she would get found guilty, or he would get found. I don't know with drag queens.
Okay, I think we've butted heads on this one a while. It's a little tangential, but you know what? It was interesting. I think different interpretations does play into the ultimate point, right? Of tech censorship, because it doesn't really matter what your TOS or moderation policies are. What matters is who is enforcing those moderation policies, who is interpreting those moderation policies. And given that that's the case, right, does the government have any interest in regulating what can and cannot be censored on a tech platform or on a social media platform? And do you think they should step in and, as Texas, I believe, tried to do, stop social media companies from banning you or something over infractions? What are you thinking?
We're linking these things in a weird way. Like the immediate cases that come to mind when we talk about whether or not government has an interest in interfering with the censorship of social media sites is for example, like China going through like Gmail accounts and things of that sort. and censoring discussion of particular topics, once again, in the name of its national self-interest. These often run contrary to each other. Like the government interfering with social media is very rarely in defense of citizens' rights. It's more often having to do with, you know, the control of information that it deems to be sensitive to its own interests, aside from those rights.
I mean, our own president, Joe Biden, has called for this. Back in 2019, when he was a candidate, he was arguing for the revocation of Section 230. I think it was on the basis that he said these companies are helping promote and propagate falsehoods that they know to be false.
Is that something that you guys support, the revocation of Section 230?
No, of course not.
No, but I'm saying there's already there are government officials right now, currently even our sitting president, who think that there is a compelling interest for the government to step in and begin trying to moderate these platforms, I guess, to promote in the interest of promoting truth, I suppose. But that doesn't really capture the spirit of the First Amendment. I don't think the spirit of the First Amendment is to promote truth necessarily.
Interesting. Fair enough. Okay, we are kind of winding down a little bit. I do have one more.
Can I ask one question real quick?
Please, if you have something to go for, go
for
ahead.
you guys. And I love this example because it's one that also is very consistent with my strong capitalist beliefs. If you have a situation in which, let's say, you had a large social media company that said that they were not shadow banning. Okay, let's just say that they came out and they said they advertised to their consumer base that they were not shadow banning, and then later it came out that they were. Right, it came out that actually behind the scenes, when they were hiding in the shadows, they were actually shadow banning certain people, more often conservatives, but let's just say generally speaking.
And we're just for clarification before you continue, we're taking this as well, it's hypothetical, yes, but we're taking this shadow banning to be not the accidental consequence of algorithms, insufficiently understood or monitored, but like a deliberate policy. We have emails exchanged that show, hey, we want to ban X, Y, and Z, but not tell them.
It's designating certain people as having less amplification. It's shadow banning, right? Reducing the visibility. If this happens, when they promise that they're not doing it, do you agree that this would be some kind of fraud and they should probably be liable to the people that they lied to?
No. I think if it was a paid service, maybe you can make an argument for that. But I think shadow banning, quote unquote shadow banning, it's a very specific term, and people play around with these terms in terms of marketing all the time. So I think it's kind of silly to try to pretend that there's a stringent definition or example of what shadow banning means or what shadow banning is.
Sure, I don't think there should be some kind of obligation on people offering a free service to be transparent about what's going on behind the scenes. I think when we're talking about people who are accepting a TOS, that maybe as a part of their signing up process, or because they pay for some kind of feature, they are guaranteed access to some kind of good, whether that's hey, and we will boost your profile against others that haven't paid for the service. I think in that case you'd have a case for fraud, but unless there's actually some kind of explicit relationship like that, this strikes me as no different than, for example, somebody banning people from a Discord server for reasons of personal judgment.
We call these things free, right? But that's only because we don't pay money for them. It's not as if they come at no cost. I mean,
yeah, but you're not
our data. They do use our data. They do use. We are the product, right? We are the cost. We are giving access to ourselves.
In a sense, but you are not selling your data as a currency for the thing. You are agreeing to them being allowed to read your data while you are using their site. That is.
And given that
that doesn't fall under terms of service, though. That's a privacy policy. And these two things are distinct. I think a privacy policy is just going to outline to you how a company is interacting and harvesting your user data, but the terms of service is going to be something distinct from that. No.
Sure, but when you say that free companies that are free have no obligation to be honest to their user base, again, the agreement is being made, a tacit agreement between both parties is being made, known or not, right? You're agreeing to let them use your data, and they are agreeing to not just arbitrarily moderate you or arbitrarily ban you and things like that. And at least in most cases, as I'm aware.
Are they agreeing to that? Can't they ban you for whatever reason they want? I don't know if they're agreeing
Well,
on each.
as far as like how the courts recognize it, if a company outlines the rules and their terms and conditions, and there's an affirmative like click or agreement that you have to do that says I agree to this or I've read this, and then you proceed to use their site. If there is within those rules something that says we can change this at any time that you want, they can't actually enforce that as a meaningful contract, because then you would be co-signing and affirming that you will like continue to agree, like you're agreeing to a contract that you've not yet seen. So those are null. But if they are regularly updating them and having you affirmatively check, I agree to the updates, I agree to the updates, then those are enforceable.
Okay, interesting. I'm not sure the law behind that. But to Lactoid's a larger point, right? Like, again, if you because people use Twitter and people use Twitch, YouTube, all these other streaming sites for their business. Like, people's livelihoods are tied to this. They go on to these sites and they become involved and creators on these sites and use these sites in order to make money, in order to live, right? Um, do the companies have no responsibility to be honest with the people using their services for this purpose?
Well, you're asking if they have an ethical, if there's some kind of
Yeah,
ethical
it's like I'm not
censor.
talking legal. I'm talking ethical.
Well, so my question was like legal, right? And I think the answers are crazy,
Okay.
right? So I can imagine a scenario in which, let's say, I put out an ad where you get a free car if you come and watch 50 hours of ads, right? And then at the end of you dedicating a significant amount of time watching ads and like being in this space that I've created, then like you don't get the car actually at the end.
What's the free car that Twitter offered conservatives?
So when you come out and say we are not doing this, like we are just not doing this, but then like so what this entices a bunch of people to come onto the platform and watch their ads, right? Become like a money making device for the company, and then it turns out they're doing it. It would seem to me that like there's
Has it turned out that Twitter is shadow banning conservatives?
Well, here's the question. What did Twitter specifically say they're not doing?
Well, hold on, real quick. I asked the hypothetical, and everyone's resounding answer was no. But like, my question is like in the hypothetical.
I do want to hear an answer to that, though. That's an interesting question.
I'll answer it, but I'm not sure I got the answer that I was like for the question I was asking, which is, I guess maybe a reiteration. Do you really think that like if like any one of these free social media companies can just flat out fucking lie to like bring users into their platform and then not deliver on what they're saying?
I don't know. Is that illegal? Let's say on my website, let's say that I say if you subscribe tier 2, I'll give you a free hug if I see you or something. And then let's say I'm not doing that at all. That's just a total scam. Is that like, or not tier 2 actually?
Whoa, it should be. It should be.
Wait, hold on, because we're not talking about paid things. I'm sorry. What if you come into my chat and I say like, oh yeah, if you sign up for a thing on my website, and you come chat, I'll give you a hug if I see you. And I'm like, no, I just lied. I totally lied. Just get more people to sign up. Is that illegal? What is the law? I have no idea. I'm not actually sure.
I don't think Twitter's saying they're not.
But I think it should be.
But hang on, I don't think Twitter's saying they're not shadow banning people. Entails that they are promising that if you break TOS or you commit slurs or you engage in like pernicious language, that therefore they are obligated to promote you commensurately with other people who don't do those
well,
things.
This is why I'm asking what he means by shadow ban. Again, shadow ban is a contentious term, right? I think in the most strictest sense, shadow banning means that you're removing somebody's access to the site almost completely without them knowing it. So that means that nobody else can see their tweets, nobody can go to their profile. They have no idea, and they've been basically completely delisted, but it's a shadow ban. The person's not aware of it.
Yeah, so for example...
Just real quick, but I think, so Twitter does things like they deboost people, or they might deprioritize people, or hide them from certain people's feeds, and it's arguable whether that constitutes shadow banning. That's why I'm asking what specifically did Twitter say they didn't do. And the comparison I'll always use is for cell phones. Cell phone companies today, every single provider will not say that they're throttling. They don't say they're throttling. What they'll say is they deprioritize you after you've used 21 gigabytes or whatever of data. It's essentially the exact same thing. And if you're not wanting to get throttled, you are going to get throttled, but they call it deprioritization on the tower based on how much data you've consumed. So that's
it's the same.
I would like to answer this.
Yeah, let me read this statement. So if we want to move away from the hypothetical and actually get to Twitter, which is
yes, please.
Obviously it's based on.
Answer the question.
Yeah, this is the statement that was made, right? People are asking us if we shadow ban. We don't. I think the real question behind the question is, are we doing something according to political ideology or viewpoints? We are not. Period. We do not look at content with regards to political viewpoint or ideology. We look at behavior.
Okay. Is that wrong?
So from what I read from the Twitter files, I only read those, I guess, only specific parts. And from what I read, they were deprioritizing people based on their political beliefs.
Well, I guess it depends on whether or not I get.
Okay. Just don't.
I guess
do
it-
stay on this topic. Yeah.
I guess it depends on whether or not you consider someone, for example, like spreading untoward statements about, say, black communities to be a political belief, or whether or not that's just like an aggression on a community that's not.
I want
respectable.
to hear the back and forth a little bit more from Destiny and
Yeah, or
Light.
no, that would have been the question I was going to ask. That was President Sunday asked, because this is the issue that conservatives keep running into. Okay, I'll go onto a platform, I'll spam the N word, and then get banned, and I'll go, they're censoring me because I'm conservative. Conservatives think you should have freedom of speech. That's the issue. My understanding is I've never seen somebody banned from Twitter for political ideology, but you guys will say things like disagreeing with the COVID narrative. That's part of my political ideology, which I think is a fair point. But it feels different to say I'm banning conservatives. Like, that statement seems to take on a different character versus saying I'm banning somebody because of their political ideology versus like COVID misinformation or something, right? That's the issue, I think. So I feel like
it's identical, right? If you're making like vaccine skeptical content and they specifically said we do not look at content, then they're looking at content, which they said they didn't do.
No. They said political content, didn't they? They're not going to say not looking at any content. They probably said political content.
I don't really look at the statement again. They probably made something like that. With regards to political viewpoint or ideology.
Yes. So then my question, because here's my next question, because if I read it how you're if I read it how you're reading it, couldn't I arguably say every single ban on that site is due to some sort of political ideology? Every ban on every site is due to some sort of underlying political ideology, no? If I think that freedom of speech is a principal thing, yeah.
Right,
so
right. If you want to be like hyper pedantic, but like,
well, no, that's your point of view. Your point of view
once again goes back to like the spirit of like what were they saying when they say we do not do this, we do not deprioritize people or like shadow ban people based on like their political affiliation, based on like their what they're saying, right? Or not what the content,
I
right?
understand
not
what you're saying.
the behavior.
Yeah, I understand what you're
and
saying.
They were doing that.
No, let's look at the spirit, okay? Let's use our full brains, okay? Twitter is saying that they're not banning people based on their political points of view. And you're saying like, oh, that's not true because you guys are banning for COVID, aren't you? Of course they're banning for COVID misinformation. They've already said that. They're not hiding that. But they're not banning you because you're a conservative. A liberal could go on and spread that quote-unquote misinformation, or a conservative could go on and spread the misinformation. They're not banning you based on your political point of view. They're banning you based on what they have in their TOS as stuff that they don't allow on the platform, which is COVID misinformation, election misinformation, as they define it, right? It's not based on your political point of view. It's based on violating those parts of the TOS.
Yeah, vaccine disinformation is nonpartisan. Anybody could perpetuate it. Also, Lactoid, do you think that the algorithms themselves are perpetuating bias?
What? Algorithms themselves are perpetuating bias?
Is that what is against conservatives on Twitter and getting them disproportionately banned or shadow banned or targeted?
I guess I wish the algorithms would be more transparent so I could like know for sure in what ways. I mean, it certainly feels so. I don't know. I guess this one I have a little bit less. This is more of just like a gut feeling, where it does appear that people say, well, we're gonna expand like the list of like words or phrases or like protected groups of people to like start including people who like, especially when it comes to class, for example. I think recently, like one of the new TOS from Discord was like you can't discriminate against somebody based on where their income is. You know, and now if where your income is from like a government
we can't
program,
make poor jokes.
Yeah, no. Well, that's the thing, right? Like, well, if your income is from like a government program, well, this is inherently going to put you on a direct collision course with conservatives who generally don't consider that to be like a legitimate form of income. Like if that's like what you're living off of is for your income.
I think.
And so
I think Stephen's
think,
case.
Like, they do actually like. I think it does in effect have that effect where it does seem to like
stochastic platforming.
Yeah, it's biased against conservatives. Yes.
But don't you think that like your ability, like the same skills that would make somebody like a good coder, is not necessarily going to mean that they have the ability to like even detect or identify those sources of bias, and like adjust their algorithms to exclude stuff like that?
Hopefully they would adjust their algorithms to not bias people based on or not bias. Well, really the problem is that they're like banning people or shadow banning people in the first place.
Yeah, the question here isn't an algorithmic error. It's like this is like an intentional policy set, right?
Well, I think Stephen, to that point, I think Stephen's case was actually stronger than he articulated it. So he was saying like they might deprioritize people, or they might say they're deprioritizing people. My question following that from those, by deprioritizing, do we mean that they are actively putting like a marker on this account saying this one will get deboosted relative to everybody else, or are they simply neglecting to boost that one in addition? And then the question becomes, are social media platforms obligated to commensurately boost every single voice to some part? That seems like a difficult sell for me.
I believe for some accounts they were explicitly marking them as not for.
But that would be like
They were
COVID
blacklisted.
disinformation,
They were
stuff like
black-
that.
They were
Yeah.
black. They weren't just removing content. They were blacklisting accounts, limiting.
Okay,
the
sure, but let's-
limiting the visibility of entire accounts, right? How
Sure,
is
but if that-
how is that not going back to like shadow banning if you're doing it based on an account?
Because that's
No,
not
no.
traditionally what shadow banning means. Sorry.
Shadow banning is like on YouTube. So, for example, I've got a bunch of people spamming the N-word in my chat briefly. When I block them, they can still type that on their end. They will see it in their chat, but it will not appear on my chat. That's shadow banning. So for them, it appears as if they're not banned. For me and everybody else, they are banned. That's what shadow banning is. So unless that's actually taking place, Twitter isn't shadow banning people.
And that's the issue with the
Oh.
definitions, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I think I maybe this sounds stupid, but I think that's stupid. I think that when you refer to shadow banning, in I think my mind or most reasonable people I've spoken to, maybe they're not reasonable. But what shadow banning to me is you have an account and without your knowledge, right, you are put on a blacklist, right? You are marked, and now the shit that you put out is like reduced visibility to the point of like severely restricting what you believed you could do when you signed up for the service to begin with, and you spent a lot of your time on the service. So apparently, Charlie Kirk was also shadow banned, right? I mean, that's just one example that I've been like finding.
Sure.
Now,
And you have every right to be
a
upset by
bunch- a
that.
bunch-
You
a
may
bunch
think
of
that's
people-
wrong.
Well,
but-
I think it's wrong because like it feels like a lie. We're not shadow banning, but then we're gonna like create a blacklist of people where we're gonna reduce their visibility to like dramatically limit their scope. And so if I'm on Twitter and I'm like, oh, I'm fine, they don't shadow ban. Okay, I guess I'm gonna be treated fairly. So I'm gonna continue using the service instead of going to some other social media site. And so I spend hours or days or months on Twitter now because I don't believe I'm being shadow banned. But then it turns out that I am. That's a lie. That's fraud.
President Sunday,
the
let me
part-
ask you directly before you go. Let me ask you. It
It
relates to this. I promise. Okay.
Okay,
And people are giving me money to ask questions. I want to make some money here. Okay. Please give me money.
that's what. Hey, why the hell isn't my checking? Okay, go on.
I don't know. As you said earlier, the research shows that conservative voices by the algorithm are boosted 4 to 5 times, I believe is the number you used.
I have no idea.
I
don't think I said a specific number.
But you did say that you and Straighterade.
Okay, well, I
earlier,
misspoke. I think Straighterade might have had like a specific number for that. I don't have that to hand.
I don't know the specific number. The point is that the claim was, and Twitter's research only shows in 2021, that conservative ideology content is favored by the algorithm. It gets boosted more, right?
Seems to be, yeah.
Seems to be. So given that that's the case, right? If conservative content is being boosted by the algorithm, does that not imply that someone is putting their thumb on the scale because the algorithm would naturally favor that, but for some reason it's not? Would that not imply at least an increased likelihood of someone intentionally putting their thumb on the scale?
Because these things aren't equivalent. An account violating TOS and getting banned of a certain description.
We're not talking about banning. We're talking about shadow banning. We're talking about deboosting, not banning.
No, I understand, but the problem is there's no actual shadow banning taking place. So we're equivocating between quote-unquote deboosting and shadow banning. And my immediate wonder, and
I'm using it colloquially, not the
wait. I understand, but there's a reason why I'm making this distinction, because if by deboosting we simply mean they're not applying a positive boost to some parties, then that would seem to imply that what we're talking about here is some kind of obligation to actually positively boost these channels, and that's a different question. Like it may be the case, even if we agree that it's completely unethical for Twitter to be like demoting certain channels, and I don't agree with that at all. But even if we did agree with that, if all they're doing is simply not applying a boost to some channels that they're applying to others, that's not demoting, right? That's not a positive action that they're taking with respect to those channels. They're just neglecting them. Are they obligated to improve the reach of those channels? That does not seem reasonable to me.
Right, it's just the lack of promotion.
Okay. Fair enough. Gang, we circled the drain on this. This has been I found it was an interesting discussion. And I hope you all enjoyed it as well. we talked about tech censorship. We talked about freedom of speech more in generally. We went, for whatever reason, for 30 minutes on a specific line and a specific bill in a specific state, which was fun. I hope you all enjoyed that. But are there any other questions or thoughts before we kind of just wrap this up? Anything that we haven't talked about that you think is important to bring up?
Did we get to egg throwing?
I don't think we did, but I mean,
Very, very quickly. So someone from my chat who is in the know says that it was not deboosting; it was a do not amplify label. So my description is apparently accurate. Someone can disprove that if they have the wherewithal.
I don't
to
know.
do so.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to give everyone here a chance to tell people who they are, shout themselves out, and we're just going to close it out for the evening. Gang, I am Wick TV. You can find me on Twitch and YouTube, both. Twitch at twitch.tv/WickTV, and YouTube at youtube.com/Wick at Wick-TV. Check me out. We do panels like this on occasion, right? And we have hopefully interesting discussions. So if you guys want to give me money, that's important to do too. Like, subscribe if you're watching this. Straighterade, what about you? Where can people find you?
I'm at Straighterade on everything, or Straighterade_, and at some point I'll eventually start streaming it and bother doing it on my end, so that's all I have to promote.
Okay. Any closing thoughts that you want to add, or are you good?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Sunday, go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for putting this on. I think you did a wonderful moderation job, as evidenced by the fact you allowed me to talk for roughly 75% of the time. I can be found on President Sunday on YouTube and Twitter, and I'm technically on Twitch, but I have not used it at all, and I have no immediate plans to.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you not running away this time. That's great. We
Jesus.
stayed. Next up, Lactoid. Go ahead. You okay?
Thanks, Wick. Thank you all for talking to me. If you like what I had to say, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Thanks.
Simple, to the point. Any closing thoughts, Destiny? Anything you want to add?
No, I had so much fun. I love you all very much.
I can
I
tell.
look forward to Lactoid being the replacement for who was the crazy conservative lawyer guy?
Not Rob Nora, was it? Was he
No.
conservative?
The guy who was like religious.
I know who you're
in
talking
Bible
about, but I'm
readings.
not going to say it because it's mean. So
Wait, how is it mean?
calling him
Okay.
crazy. He's a kind man. I don't know why.
Well, who is the kind man that you're talking about? Oh, lecture fan, that guy. Yeah, I look forward to you stepping up. As our new
Look,
conservative.
Lactoid, I will stand Lactoid. He is my favorite conservative. If I had to pick a conservative, right, I would pick Lactoid. Lactoid is my favorite. So thank you for being here, Lactoid. Thanks, Destiny, for being here. And thank you, audience. Okay, we're gonna close it out. And yeah, I don't want to do opens right now. I'm tired and I'm hungry. And
Wow.
yeah,
Mhm.
here we are.
Jeez.
So I know, disappointing, but
I'll take questions on my channel. Go
fair
subscribe to
enough.
President Sunday.
Go do that. But for now, I will bid thee all adieu. Bye bye.
Arrivederci.
Be careful. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks for coming.
Push the button, coward.
You go first.
No. I can't. I'll never live it down.
Fine. Good chat though. Thanks for pushing back. Good shit.
Yep. Have a good night.
All right. So it says be right back, but I'm still here. I had to basically my computer somehow got reformatted, so now here I am with a weird little be right back symbol on. Anyway, thank you guys so much for I really appreciate all the support, and I really appreciate you guys watching and giving your thoughts. I do content like this, so panel debates. On Sundays we try to do some StarCraft, StarCraft 2, and just talking about political shit. And occasionally I try to host my own political debate show as well. If you liked it, please consider just giving me a follow. I think on YouTube it's a sub. I mostly stream on Twitch, but obviously I move all my Twitch streams into my YouTube, so they're all going to show up for your viewing pleasure. And And obviously, when people are banned off Twitch, we have to do it on YouTube as well. But yeah, so I'm going to bounce now. Thank you guys so much. Good shit. Also, thanks, Jacob. You a real one.